Happy Christmas, everybody. It's episode 117 of the Warhammer 40,000 podcast, which goes by the identity of Look Out, Sir. My name is Dan, and it's that bit at the beginning of the show where I introduce my good buddy Phil. Happy Christmas, Phil. How's you doing?
Not too bad, thank you. Happy Christmas to yourself and to our loyal listeners.
And our not so loyal listeners.
Exactly. If you frequent us, on occasion, if we are your listen buddies occasionally, you slide in and out from time to time, a booty listener, so to speak, then you can...
That's a very, garbled reference you've gone for there, mate. But I understand the kind of broad intent behind it. I think you might not have landed it as well as you would have hoped to, but
exactly,
you got the point across.
When you get the urge for some 40k podcasts, you hit us up, you tap that button, and you download us and give us a listen.
Exactly. Use us and abuse us and discard us with all the relative, indifference that you might expect from that sort of occurrence. God bless. But yeah, so it's Christmas time, and this is a really exciting time of the year for a number of reasons. It's obviously a time of celebrations, but it's also a great time for reflection, and that is very much what we are attempting to do with the content of episode 117. Because what are we doing, Phil?
We're going to take a look back, casting our eyes and our ears and our memory back to January and the following 12 months therein. So we're just going to talk about 40k for the last year, what we thought about it, whether we thought it was good, whether we thought it wasn't good. I mean, it does tie in somewhat to our recap of 9th edition episode, but we're going to talk a bit more broader this time. We're going to talk about the models, the range releases, all the books that have come out and everything else. So we were going to also do predictions for 2022, but basically, spoilers, we've already recorded the recap section and it's pretty long. So we're going to do that probably in the new year episode, which makes more sense.
Yeah, that's the general plan. And you might hear it in my voice. I'm not feeling exactly tip top right now, so I have decided that I'm going to be lame and be like, I can't put this on for more than an intro and a little bit of an outro. So there we go. We're going to get around to talking about 2022 in the confines of 2022. But for now, we're going to transition across to our Christmas Day 5-star review.
Peter!
Oh, hello,
What are
Dad.
you doing in here, son?
Oh,
What have I told you about wasting your time with these little plastic figurines?
It's not a waste of time, I like it.
How dare you talk back to me, Peter? It's about time you grew up.
I don't want to grow up. Oh, man, maybe there's something on the radio. Yeah, this is nicer.
Peter!
What's that?
That's right, it's me, the ghost of a award-winning TV and radio presenter, Jeremy Beadle.
Jeremy Beadle?
Yeah, that's right.
Wow.
Now let me tell you here, Sonny, my dad was always telling me to grow up, and I never did. And look how successful I was. So ignore him, Peter, and keep playing with that little plastic crack. And while you're at it, listen to the Look Out Sir podcast, which right now is time for the 5-star review.
Wow, thanks, Jeremy.
Who are you talking to with there, son?
Jeremy Beadle.
What? No!
This week's 5-star review comes from, where might you expect, Philip?
I'm gonna guess Apple Podcasts of the Americas.
Oh,
No, it was Great Britain, wasn't it?
No. It was Apple Podcasts for certain, but it's the land down under once again, Phil.
Ooh.
Those beautiful Australian peeps are, supporting, listening, and or leaving 5-star reviews for our, pleasure, I suppose. So yeah, this review comes from an individual called Quizinova or Quizinova or Quizinova. I'm not entirely sure what the exact pronunciation is supposed to be of this individual, but they come via Apple Podcasts of Australia, and they say 40k crowd favorite, 5 stars, which is, of course, a prerequisite of appearing in this 5-star review segment. Joy to the world. What's the next line of that statement in the context of Christmas? Joy to the world. Da, 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 da. Do you know what that is, Phil?
I'm afraid I don't know.
Is it the king is born, the saviour's here? There's some kind of
that
statement
either
that regales.
sounds quite correct.
Yes. All the same, 40k, crowd favourite, 5-star review from Australia. Let's get into it. Found this show a few months back, and I'm happy to say it's become a favourite to listen to while painting or long drives. That's fair. I also would enjoy listening to this podcast while painting or doing long driving. And in some instances, I do. Less so painting.
Do you sometimes do driving and painting at the same time?
I've never combined the two crafts. I imagine if I was to purchase myself one of those swanky Tesla vehicles that perchance with its self-driving functionality, I would be able to potentially attempt such a thing.
Mm.
But unfortunately, I haven't got the budget as of yet to purchase said Tesla. And as a result, I'm merely having to imagine what that's like as opposed to having lived it directly myself. How about you, Phil? You tried to combine the two? I mean, you don't even drive, so I mean,
no,
it'd be quite a feat.
I could be driven because that's normally my mode of transport, and I could, I guess, paint in the passenger seat. So that is a way to do it.
Absolutely. What kind of app? Anyway, look, we're not going to get into this. There's a review to be reviewing. I was going to ask you about. Anyway, no. Moving on. Dan and Philip have a great chemistry. Do you like that, Phil? Great chemistry?
Lies.
I know. It's terrible nonsense. And episode 100 was a great mix of laughs and useless 40k knowledge. Honestly, who knew the 100-inch range questions? I mean, that was actually, I remember that. That was one of Richie's quiz questions, wasn't it? About what weapons had range 100. It was, I can't even remember now. And we obviously answered it at the time, or rather were given the answer at the time. It's all left my brain already.
I suspect it'll be a Forge World unit of some kind.
Probably some kind of laser beam thingamabib on a big thing. Anyway, if you're from the US and my review doesn't give you enough info, they're like the English version of Danny and John from Mob Rules. Do you know Danny and John from Mob Rules?
No.
You never heard of that? I've never heard of that. I'm just going to quickly
The name sounds familiar, but I've never actually listened to them.
Oh, they're also a 40k podcast.
We've got
We should have better awareness of these guys, clearly, because they're in the business of doing what we do. How incredibly, big time of us not to acknowledge our other podcast, content creators. We're just out of touch, mate.
Exactly, in our own little bubble.
It's terrible business. I'm going to check them out for sure. Anyway, keep it up, lads, as it gives me something to look forward to when it's been a quite or difficult day. Okay, fair enough. Also, your next quiz definitely should add who Uriel Ventress arch nemesis is. Not that I'm a common Ultramarine player. Right, okay. So he wanted us to ask questions about Uriel Ventress in our next quiz. I mean, we recorded what will be our 40k quiz of the year weekend just gone. And Uriel Ventress did appear as the answer to one of the questions.
He did, yeah.
But
was not the question asked. There was a community round as well. So this individual had his chance to ask us that question.
Quizinova, he could have swooped in there. and given us the question in that context. But clearly, they'd assumed that by putting it in the 5-star review segment that they had satisfied whatever criteria was required.
Suffice to say, it's a lore question. No one will get it except
Bar Joe.
maybe Joe. Yeah.
Yes.
He might know.
Yeah. Although, to be fair, he probably will half get the answer, and then Richie will just give it to him anyway because.
Yeah, exactly. Probably Orc War Boss, and then Richie would have already given him the points at that point. No name needed.
That's how it rolls. Not that we're bitter or biased or, attempting to offer any spoilers to anything. Who knows how that whole quiz played out? But watch out for it. It was a fun old time. But that'll be coming out next weekend, assuming that I can maintain the wherewithal to edit it all over the course of the coming days. But I'm hopeful that I'll feel better soon, and then I'll just be able to smash it out over the course of the next week. So that'll be fine. I believe. I've also got to record a bunch of scorekeeper segments still, which is a thing that I need to do. So yeah, got to crack on with that at some point in the coming days to get all that stuff sorted. But there we go. Thank you very much for your review. It's hugely appreciated. And thank you to everyone who listens and supports the show. If you would like to be like Quizinova and leave us a review of your own, please consider doing so. And we will promise to read out your review here within the 5-star review segment at some point in the future. But to take us home and thank Quizinova in yet more detail, here's Phil.
Thank you, Quizinova. Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to you. Just specifically you. Thank you for your review. It's very kind of you. Thank you for the question that we don't know the answer to. So sorry about that. Glad you enjoyed the last quiz from the episode 100. You'll enjoy the Lookout Sir 40k end of the year quiz, which, as Dan said, is coming out next week. Head over to YouTube, though, to watch that because we've actually filmed it, which I don't think we really qualified very much unless you've watched the 2019 version, which we also did. And if you haven't watched that one, you should go back and watch it immediately because actually it's pretty good fun.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah. Thanks very much. Appreciate your review. And yeah, keep an eye out for the next quiz.
Absolutely. Well, there we go. Thank you so much to all of our patrons. Maybe consider buying some merchandise.
Speaking of merch, did you like my Space Vampires t-shirt?
I mean, I did, but, did anyone else?
I think a few people said, yeah, it's cool. I think maybe we put it up on the store.
Why not, eh? Why not?
It's low effort to do. Because it's It's print on demand, isn't it?
Do you want to bring it to life ahead of this podcast going out into the world, or do you think that's just too last minute now?
It should be doable. All I need to do, I guess, is email the guy the file, right? Whether he can do it in time is the question.
I mean, yeah, have a word, see what can be done.
We'll try and get it up.
Whee! There we go.
Oh, yeah.
All right, brilliant. There we go. Let's get on with it. Transitional noise. Woo! 2021, a year ever etched in our minds for a variety of reasons, but we're going to talk about the Warhammer 40,000 related reasons why we think that 2021 was seemingly significant. Noting that obviously there are other things that will have impacted people during the course of 2021, but this isn't a podcast about those things. This is a Warhammer 40,000 podcast. So myself and Phil. Hello, Phil.
Hi. Can I just interrupt one thing? Is your mic the right way around?
My mic's the right way around. Yeah. Why?
Do the buttons go sideways normally?
Right. It was a good intro, Phil. I'm going to have to stop it now to answer your questions.
Sorry, because you just sound a little bit different. So I was wondering if it's because your mic's rotated the wrong way.
How does that sound? Does that sound better?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Weird. I might have changed the settings. I thought always that you were supposed to talk to the side of these.
Well,
I could be misinformed.
Well, I think what you don't want is it rotated around the wrong way. So you don't want the in bit here but you want to sort of talk still in that direction, but just off.
How about that? Is that better?
Yeah, that sounds good.
That sounds good?
Yeah.
All right, let's try that again.
All right.
Let's try that again. 2021. A year etched in everyone's minds for a variety of reasons, mostly because, if you're listening to this, you probably lived through it and are continuing to do so at the point in which this podcast came out. Words. At the point of which this podcast has come out. But it is coming to a conclusion soon, and we are going to look back upon the events of 2021 and reflect upon them through the prism, the filter of Warhammer 40,000. Because obviously, a great many things happened in 2021, but obviously, that is of little consequence to us, a Warhammer 40,000 podcast. So myself and Phil, hello Phil,
Hello.
are going to take the time to reflect on the events of 2021 within the confines of the 40k hobby and essentially express our thoughts, feelings, and general stuff on the topic that was 2021. So, broad and expansive opportunity for discussion, Phil. But as always, I like to just, throw you in the deep end and essentially have you establish the beginnings of the conversation. What is the main thing from a 40k perspective that you think about when you think about the year 2021?
Probably the lack of codex releases.
The lack, Phil. We've had so many.
I know, but there's still so many to go.
Codex Death Guard, Codex Dark Angels, Codex Dracari, Codex Adeptus Mechanicus, Codex Adeptus Sororitas, Codex's Thousand Sons, and Codex Grey Knights, which kind of were like a double header, Codex Orcs, and Black Templars. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 Codex releases. That's almost one per month, minus obviously.
No. I mean, back in the days of 6th and 7th edition, that is positively outstanding because you'd normally get one every 4 months.
Yeah, it was quite a sparse release schedule back in those days.
Yeah. However, in the days of 8th edition, what is now for glory days, I guess.
Really,
you would be getting a couple of months quite easily, if not more, because they knocked all of theirs out in the span of just over a year, I think it was.
Yeah, it was close to 2 years, I want to say. The book dropped, or rather, 8th edition came out in 2017, and I feel like they had pretty much released every codex by the end of 2019, because if you remember, the Adeptus Sororitas, the Sisters of Battle, came as kind of like the big Christmas release of 2019, but certainly going into 2020, they had done everything. So realistically, that was actually closer to 2.5 years. But they definitely had more of a kind of regular cadence. But then surely that's, a pandemic related scenario, because quite honestly, we almost certainly would have had Codex Custodes, or whatever it's called now. Is it Custodes or is it Talons of the Emperor?
I think it's still called Custodes, even though I think you can run them as Talons of the Emperor.
Fine. So Sisters are incorporated into it, the Sisters of Silence, I mean, but they're still calling it Custodes. Anyway, the point is that GSE and Custodes would have probably have come out by now had it not been for, things. But obviously that isn't what happened. Although arguably, I believe that Codex Death Guard and Dark Angels would have come out in the year 2020 had it not been for all that stuff as well. So I suppose, it's kind of like when you
It's a bit of
carry over
knock-on effects.
Yeah, it's like when you carry over holiday days into a new year. If you keep doing that in perpetuity, it's like you may as well have just taken the days in the first case. I don't know. That's a weird example.
Yeah, once you've reached your limit, you can't really get any more.
That's it. That's it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily have. I think the release schedule has been pretty strong. However, I do think people are feeling it more. Obviously, I think that's let's say the elephant in the room, the power creep, the disparity between the new codexes versus the old ones.
Well, what's super interesting about this year as well, though, right? If we go back over the codex releases, right? Death Guard, what new models did Death Guard get?
They got that one captain and it was in the quiz. The furnace thing.
The furnace thing. The thing that we all wanted to call the furnace, but it's called like a miasma fire or something really stupid like that. Yeah, so they got two things. They got a fortification and a Terminator chap with a flamer. Dark Angels? What new models did Dark Angels get?
Oh, do you know what? Nothing.
Nothing. Correct. You're absolutely right.
Right.
So they got
this is the quiz I can do. Maybe we get you to do next year's quiz.
Well, I'd probably be a little bit fairer with the scorekeeping, but we'll talk about that later on, or potentially we've already talked about it. But the point is that so like Lazarus, who was the Primaris captain who had joined the Death Wing, the Inner Circle. He was released with, I think it was Nexus he came out with, or one of the earlier Dark Angel related Psychic Awakening books. But yeah, as a result, no new Dark Angel model whatsoever for Dark Angels.
Well, you kind of did. You got Terminators because they just made them good.
Well, that's true. That is true. They made Terminators good. Fantastic. Dark Angel players got access to... Was there anything that Dark Angel players couldn't use before? Maybe Centurions? I don't know if they couldn't do Centurions before. No. Or maybe they did at the end of 8th edition, give them access to Centurions.
Yeah, I think it was more Death Watch that got the kind of access to everything. I don't
Yeah.
Maybe Death Watch had a few things because they effectively they all moved from like a unique codex to a codex supplement.
Yes, yeah. So they did add a few things, but I feel like in 8th edition, they gave them access to a lot of stuff anyway. Drukhari, what new models did Drukhari get, Phil, in the course of 2021?
Nothing, because they got Lilith, which they had already.
Yes, so they got a re-release of a model that they already had access to. Adeptus Mechanicus.
Wait, I'm thinking about it. They got the Skitarii Marshal.
They did get the Skitarii Marshal, so they got one character. So there's that. Adeptus Sororitas, they actually got quite a sizable release. They were one of the big releases. Yeah. So they got their new
Morvan Val.
They got Morvan Val, and then they got the mechanized infantry kind of mini walker things. The Nundam squad, as they call them, after the Gundam, but obviously Nundam, very clever. What else did they get? They got the ancient.
They got the Warsuits, Celestine Sacrosancts.
That's right. The
Dog
boogie boards.
Martyr. And as part of Kill Team, they got what was it called again?
They got a tank as well.
Novitiates. Oh, yes, they
Novitiate.
also got the tank as well. Yeah.
Yeah, that seemingly no one thinks is any good because I've not seen one anywhere up to this point. But maybe they've been used.
Has that actually come out now? It must have by now because I remember it was.
Well, has that tank actually not been released yet?
Do you know what? I have a sneaky feeling there might not. I mean, it's not. So I'm looking at the list of models they've released this year that came on the pick your model for the year.
No, it's here. The Castigator is £52.50. God, that's pricey. But yeah,
I think that came out much later than all the others.
Oh yeah.
From what I remember, it didn't come out at the same time.
You know, the weird thing is though with the Adeptus, sorry, got cops say it properly. The Adeptus Sororita release,
yeah,
it didn't really feel that significant. And even though it got loads of stuff, I think it's because of the way that it was kind of like a wave 2 to an already massive release. And I also think it's to do with when Sisters effectively kind of came out into the world of gaming because all of us were kind of locked away for the entirety, in most cases, of 2020. I mean, you know, a select few were out there playing in events and things, but the majority of us probably thought better of it and kept our distance. But the point is that, you know, Adeptus Sororitas didn't really get a lot of play early 9th edition. And even if they did, you probably weren't around to see it. But obviously by the time that Adeptus Sororitas were a thing was kind of around the time where we had started going back out there and playing in events again. And I think weirdly, it's like it felt unremarkable because it was almost like Sisters of Battle had always been like this. Like Sisters of Battle always had access to this stuff. It was a weird release. It just didn't quite resonate the way as other things may have done. I don't know. What did you think about?
Well, I think the first initial release was effectively just redoing all the old metal stuff. So what people were initially rocking was potentially the same armies they already had. They just rebought them in plastic. But I think most of them, most people were new players. There was also a quick point. There was also Astrid and Agathea, the two banner bearers.
Yes,
or the banner bearer and the old lady. There was that as well. This one, I actually thought it was quite a strong release as a new wave of like new units and new minis. I think that actually took people by surprise. I think it probably actually disappointed a lot of people as well because it wasn't what people were expecting. People wanted the I'm trying to think what it's called now. The Forge World. I was going to say not Repulsor, Retributor, something like that. The Forge World Rhino Repressor. That was it. I'm sure that's what it was called. So they used to do a Forge World Rhino like upgrade kit, like troop transport thing, which was Sisters specific. And when they teased the Castigator, a lot of people assumed it would be that, and it wasn't. So people were like, oh, I don't want a battle tank. Like, that's not how Sisters play. But I think other people totally embraced it. The war suits, again, very Marmite. Like, some people were like, what is this? And other people are like, this is amazing. And, you know, I think I'm a bit hesitant, but also fell on it looks cool, right? Like, and I still think they're cool. I think if I was to do Sisters, I'd just be buying Morvan Val and a bunch of those, and that'll be it.
Yeah, they're definitely cool minis. You know, I've heard some people critique how broken their hips would become if they were trying to kind of strive through the battlefield.
That's the same argument about, you know, Terminators being bent over all the time to actually fit their shoulders where they need to be in the head where the head is. Yes, I think those kind of leaps of faith always need to exist to an extent. I mean, that's the thing. It anatomically looks correct on the model. How it actually moves is another thing, and you won't ever see that unless they do like an animation featuring.
And then presumably the animator will make relevant, changes to make that figure work better in animation than it might do as a miniature.
Yeah,
you know?
I mean, I wouldn't be too surprised if when they create these, they actually do try and logistically make sure they can be animated, because they know most of their IP ends up in, you know, video games and stuff at some point. It would make sense that you would sort of do a sanity check on this thing and not just be like, here's a cool pose. Does it actually work if I move this knee joint a bit?
Yeah, potentially. But yeah, either way, I was relatively underwhelmed by the Sororitas release. Not because, you know, I'm innately negative about these things. I just think, again, it was just more for me about the cadence of the release and the fact that we had just come off the back of a significant Sisters release. And it didn't really feel like a lot of time had passed between the wave 1 and the subsequent wave 2. But I mean, obviously a lot of the stuff that came in this release was super successful because, you know, every Sisters army that I've seen is rocking the Celestin Sacrosanct and the Morgan Val. Obviously the tank has been a lot less.
I mean, how many times have you seen that about?
I've never seen it. Never seen it. Although I argue it's actually potentially a very, very good option. I mean, certainly there would be a real argument in my mind for doing a kind of armored division Sisters army where you were taking the Castigator, the what's it called, the Immolator.
Immolator. The flamer version,
yeah, and then there's the organ one, the
Exorcist.
The Exorcist, thank you. So yeah, like, I don't know, like a tank division made up of a bunch of those would be super cool. Although they could be pricey. But yeah, look, I mean, Sisters fine, whatever, right? Like, I mean, you know, it definitely feels like I don't. It didn't feel super remarkable to me, but I get it for Sisters players. It
Yeah,
potentially
I think the slightly adjacent to this is it was sort of around the Sisters book and Death Guard when we started to get the Warzone books, and it was like, here's my codex that's just come out. Here's all these extra rules, sort of for my not for my codex per se, but for my army that's in a codex that I've just bought. Now I also have to buy a Warzone book, which I thought probably, again, I didn't mind it. I thought the price of the first 2 books were pretty steep. At least it went down slightly in subsequent releases. But I didn't mind the separation of the rules personally. But I knew it annoyed a lot of people, and there was a lot of hubbub online about it.
We love our hubbub. I mean, yeah, I get it. I mean, the Warzone books is a topic all of its own. So we'll get to that in a moment. But yeah, I mean, Sisters release, fair enough, substantial. Grey Knights, what do they get, Phil?
They got Castellan Crone.
So basically nothing.
Yeah, and a true scaled version of a pre-existing character.
Yes, yeah. And again, like, not even a Primaris-fied version of himself. Because
Primaris scale, but not in actuality, because he's old school Marine still.
Yeah. So Grey Knights, they didn't get anything. Thousand Suns.
Oh, it is. Hold on, if I can remember. It's something Master, not Warp Master.
It is not a Warp Master.
It was something else.
No. It was the Infernal Master, something like that. Wasn't it?
No, I think you're right. Yeah,
something in that ballpark. But again,
oh yeah, Infernal Master. You're right.
Yeah. So a mini that I have not seen any Thousand Sun player rocking just yet. I've seen a few Thousand Sun players since the codex dropped, and I have not seen any sign of the Infernal Master. I'm actually looking at the GW website right now. It doesn't even look like you can buy him as part of the Thousand Suns.
No, because those 2 came out exclusively in, I can't remember what it's called now, the box set.
Oh yeah, well that probably
that's why it's locked away. Because you can only. It's the same with the upcoming. Or no, it's actually out now. The Custodes and Gene Stealer Cult. So that model will be only available in that box for like a year, I guess, and then normally so sometime next year they'll do separate releases for those. So I guess it's that thing of, out of people that own Thousand Sun armies, how many of them really want to buy a box full of models that they probably already own just to get a character? I think a lot of people would probably just, if they don't need any more, regular Marines, just try and get a split off of eBay or someone else that's bought the box, because it's cheaper to pay it slightly overpriced but get it a year in advance than have to buy a whole box for the models that you might not want and then have to sell yourself.
That makes sense. I think that's the thing though with these 2 releases is, like, Grey Knights and Thousand Suns, like, they definitely have got a lot of interesting sort of strategic options to them, and they've definitely got some powerful opportunities that people are taking advantage of in game. I think, they definitely made their presence known. As soon as they came out, a lot of people were running these armies. I think a lot of people have had Grey Knight armies, or maybe even Thousand Sun armies that they've been waiting to kind of bring to life on the tabletop or start using. And I think these books did kind of give them that. But again, not really very substantial releases in the sense that, you just didn't really see any new sculpts or new things for all them, bar the 2 characters. And I think this has been, bar Sisters and the next 2 examples, one of the kind of pitfalls of this year in terms of the release schedule for 40k is that it's struggled to feel significant, is my kind of overriding point. Although the next book, the Orcs, I mean, crikey, they did well for themselves. I think it's reasonable to assert, and I certainly would, that the Orcs are definitely now, if not one of, potentially the strongest range in 40k after the
Space Marines.
after the Space Marines because
yeah.
I genuinely really love the Orc range at the moment. I think it's got the most interesting range of diverse, interesting units, beautiful characters, amazing vehicles. Like it's a really strong range that I think a lot of the other Xenos races should be envious of because it's very well supported, which wasn't always the case. But I think over the span of the last 3 years, Games Workshop have done an excellent job at supporting this range. And I feel like the Beast Snaggers have kind of been shoehorned into the overall kind of Orc aesthetic, and I'm curious whether on a long-term basis, whether they're going to segregate themselves away or they're going to potentially become a more coherent direction for some of the future adaptations of Orcs.
I mean,
but who knows?
They've always done this. So it's like, Primaris could have always been its own codex separate from standard Space Marines. It's like, and they sort of did it early doors. You had Adeptus Mechanicus, Adeptus Skitari. You had Scions coming that was like a mini faction within Imperial Guard, but they've never really expanded it out to sort of be a fully fledged thing. And I guess even, everyone wants a Creep army, and that's a similar sort of situation. And I think this is just the next evolution where I don't know if they do it with the intention of maybe one day we'll add more to it to the point where it could be its own sort of sub-faction in its own right, or they just go, no, let's just give you 5 or 6 models, and if you just want to collect them as a small army, you can do, and you don't need all the other stuff, and give people that kind of choice.
But I mean, in terms of the Snaggers and what they got for the Snaggers, you got the Orc box set that essentially gave you a bunch of really nice Snagger minis, but you effectively went on to get the actual Beast Snagger boys, the large, ridiculous Mattel Killrig, Zogrod Wart Snagger, the Beast Boss, the Great White Squig, and the other variant of it. So you got a real healthy amount of things, including refreshes for some units that otherwise haven't necessarily received a lot of love over the years. So you got a new Pain Boss.
The Copters.
Again, the Copters are a weird one because you can only get those in the Combat Patrol boxes at the moment, can't you?
Yeah. But that's not often the way, because that's a new release. So unless it's done on a sprue that's combined with other stuff, you would assume it would be released at a later date as a standalone kit.
Yeah, because the new Orc boys are only available in the Combat Patrol box as well, right? I'm pretty sure that's the case.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
So maybe there is some kind of synergy between the sprues for the Copters and the boys, and then you get the War Boss in Mega Armor that is also seemingly Combat Patrol only. So I mean, Orcs have genuinely got a really compelling Combat Patrol box in terms of if anyone out there is aspiring to do Orcs, I think that's a really pretty fantastic collection of models to kickstart your more traditional, dare I say, Orc style army.
Yeah.
And I do love the Death Dread Mini. The Death Dread Mini is still probably one of my all-time favorite Dreadnought sculpts.
Yeah. No, it's cool.
Yeah, I love its weird kind of massive orc skull and just the weird kind of ramshackle nature of it. I think it's just a beautiful sculpt. But yeah, so Orcs did all right for themselves.
They also got Commandos as part of Kill Team.
Oh, geez, of course they did. Yeah. And they're gorgeous, right?
Yeah, but actually, they're actually honestly some of the best minis this year. Probably, if not the best. I didn't vote for them. I gave it to Helbrecht in my vote. But as a unit, by far the best unit that's come out this year.
Oh, easily, yeah. I'd say for me, it's between them. God, who's another unit that could even compete? Weirdly, the Pathfinders they did in Kill Team as well were pretty decent.
No, that's an upgrade kit, an upgrade sprue.
Oh yeah, God, it's only an upgrade kit, isn't it? Yeah, God, I remember now. I was trying to grip at straws there. I was like, did anyone else have a squad? Because there's the thing, though, right? What other 40k squads were they?
A squad that came out. I really like them. Obviously, you got the Novitiates and the Sacrosancts.
You got the Krieg.
Yeah, you've got that.
Yeah, the Krieg. Yeah. Moving along. But yeah, so yeah, look, I mean, Orcs did well for themselves, and that was really great to see, and that was a good release. It's a shame that the Orc release was so marred by the focus on their Speed Freak buggy spam competitive build, because I think the Orc Codex offers so much more creative potential than that one well-established build.
Yes. You also had the weird issue where the Codex came out in the limited edition box set, but then the actual Codex didn't come out for a much longer period of time, along with a lot of the models didn't come out for a longer period of time. So it's like a lot of people had the rules, but not the models. And, you know, even the Games Workshop tournaments had to basically say, you can't use those new rules yet, to be fair on everyone else.
God, yeah, that was weird, wasn't it? But no, I love the new Painboy mini. Actually, looking at him, I think, you know, he's quite nice. I think the helmeted variant of him is less awesome than his fleshy face with cyborg eye. But
yeah, I really like the War Boss with the little grot and with the machine gun on his back.
Oh yeah, the War Boss is pretty awesome. It's a great range. It's a really great range. It's hard not to want to start an Orc army.
I mean, if you look at like, so now Orcs, Necrons, and Sisters are probably the newest sort of. I mean, even Death Guard is relatively all new sculpts.
Yeah.
But yeah, it feels like those three are the ones that are like up there alongside Space Marines as like the best looking minis.
Yeah. No, without doubt. I think they are pretty strong. And then on the topic of Space Marines, we closed out the year with the Templars. It's weird, the Templar release, because it's got some of the most gorgeous Marine miniatures Games Workshop's ever made. Phil has already admitted to voting for Helbrecht as his mini of the year, but I would support that. I think, you know, Helbrecht to me isn't necessarily as strong a miniature as Be'lakor, but I think the thing about Be'lakor is Be'lakor is this really massive, ever-present kind of demonic entity that really has that really kind of horrific, opposing look to him. And I think they did an amazing job of establishing like Be'lakor and creating this gorgeous sculpt of him. But I think the thing I like about Helbrecht is the restraint and the actual kind of quintessential Marine qualities of him. I think that's the thing that really kind of, you know, trumps him, or rather trumps Be'lakor in this instance. I think, but those were the two that I was debating between. But I think weirdly, genuinely, I think weirdly, the new Be'lakor sculpt robs Be'lakor of some of the personality that they'd established in his original sculpt. I think the original Be'lakor has more attitude, more presence, more personality than the modern Be'lakor sculpt, which is just super imposing, dangerous, and you know, he's a gorgeous sculpt, but I kind of like the nuances of Helbrecht personally. I think there's something more awesome about that. Plus, I love the servitors. I think that's the thing that kind of brings it to life. It's the narrative of it all.
Yeah, it was cool that it was based on some old Mark Gibbons, I think, artwork. And that seems to be like a trend that they've been doing a lot lately. So Mephiston, they did a similar thing. And on one hand, I'm like, it's cool, but I don't want them to do it for everything. Like, just it feels like they do like to recycle old ideas. They like to look back into the past to be like, what can we use and dig up? What can we turn from like a rogue trader idea or a sketch into a new model or a new range? Bringing those things back. And I think sometimes that's cool. Sometimes I'm like, I don't want it to stifle innovation. Like, it's a cool pose. I think Helbrecht actually is an example of them doing it right. However, you know, sometimes if you can be a bit too dogmatic about it, you could have had another equally amazing, if not better, sculpt. But it's like, no, you were wedded to this kind of idea of doing something which ultimately is basically fan service, right? It's like, oh, they will remember this and love it.
But seemingly we did in both instances, right? I mean, the Mephiston sculpt, you know, is a gorgeous mini, and Helbrecht is better still. And you know, both of those are based on those old Mark Gibbon artworks. And
Yeah.
you know, Mark Gibbons, in my opinion, was the best when it came to heroic single figure illustrations. Like I think his artwork easily is some of the most beloved artwork, at least for me anyway.
Honestly,
in all 4K.
Same here. He was always the one I looked out for in the codexes, especially because I used to do dwarves for fantasy. So he did some absolutely amazing ones for them.
Yeah. I mean, this is the thing. If Games Workshop use his illustrations as the basis of bringing to life the Phoenix Lords again, like that would just be amazing. Like, you know, his illustrations of the Phoenix Lords are phenomenal pieces of work. So, you know, I'd love to see that kind of attitude brought to life with what they're doing with that. But, you know, either way, I'm excited to see what comes around the corner on that front. But that's when we start talking about our 2022 predictions. But yeah, I think the thing with the Black Templar release, again, right? The Black Templar release is cool. It's a significant release, and it's an important update that has brought to life that army for a whole, you know, slew of new players of Black Templars, new consumers, new gamers, whatever you want to call them. New people are getting into Black Templars. Other people are rekindling their former enjoyment of them. But again, as a release, right? Like, legitimately, it's just Primaris versions of what had come before, right? There's nothing in there that's remarkably new. There's no new ideas.
There is relics as physical pieces.
But again, right? Innovations in terms of like miniature design and kind of upgrade sprues. I'm absolutely in favor of that. Like, I think that is great. But what I'm saying is that the only real new unit they added to the army is the lieutenant, i.e. the Castellan. And then other than that, everything is what you could have always taken for Black Templars before then, just primarily.
Yeah, I mean, well, this is the thing. Like, that's exactly what they did with Sisters, though, right? I wouldn't be surprised if, you know, a year or 2 years' time, they go, here's an extra thing for them. And I also think you've got to think this is literally the first time they've done properly beyond characters, factions and Ultramarines. I have to preface this. Faction specific units, like sub-faction specific units for Space Marines that are Primaris. So normally Primaris, all generic. You've got a couple of characters.
They've done a few where they basically create units out of
pre-existing
Primaris
ones.
box set,
yeah, like
plus
the
upgrade
Reavers,
kit.
The
Hounds of Morkai,
the old Hounds, yeah.
The Primaris Death Company, for example.
Yes, or you've got, you know, your Death Watch kill teams, which are effectively just pre-existing units creating a new thing out of them.
Yes,
but this is the first time where they've finally delved into actually, no, we're going to make unique units for all these chapters, and it might be, you know, next year and onwards that we will actually start to see that for the other chapters, and that this is like the little teaser. So yeah, you've got a couple of units, and they're going to do that for everyone, and then maybe, you know, just cycle round and they're, you know, give everyone an extra unit or an extra character or what have you to start to make them all individually unique.
Yeah, well, it's exciting, right? I mean, it's cool that they're steadily getting to a point where they're starting to release new versions of those units, and to imagine that we're going to start to see Primaris variants of Sanguinary Guard, Thunderwolf Cavalry, you know, insert other thing that's specialist to certain army types. So, you know, it is exciting, certainly for those of us who are still in the business of collecting and playing Marines here and there. But yeah, look, I mean, here's the thing. I love the Black Templar release. I think they handled it perfectly. I think the box set that they released for it was fantastic. I think the John Blanche artwork inspired Castellan sculpt was fantastic. And again, a really great example of what you're talking about, Phil, in terms of the fan service. They'll remember this type messaging. But also the fact that, you know, they just sort of really just some of their best work in terms of the range and the sculpts that we've got for that
Yeah,
collection. I think it's great.
I would argue though that the Castellan is the one where it doesn't really fit in. Like if that was a like a Black Library or an anniversary store exclusive mini, like they, when they first brought back Eisenhorn and stuff, or the Noise Marine, for example, it would make sense in that context because it's like this is a bit of a one-off, doesn't really fit within the range, but it's this thing you can collect, but you can also play it in your army. That one was a really weird one because they've sort of brought it back and sort of gone, this is Primaris, and it's like, doesn't look it. Like, you ain't fooling anyone. It's like, I guess that, there's no sort of law or logical explanation behind it other than someone wanted his old armor and just sort of got it stretched out a bit to fit his new Primaris body. Or maybe I'm just overthinking it, and you should just look at it as it's a cool model, which is what it is, but it just doesn't fit in with the rest of the Primaris stuff.
Yeah, it's the cross section, I suppose. Of it's the moment where Games Workshop are starting to kind of cross the Rubicon themselves and effectively just get to the point where they're like,
they're basically
everything's Primaris now.
Yeah, we don't care. Just they're all Marines. Like, no Primaris, no Firstborn. They're just kind of all the same. Like stat wise, they are. Rules wise, bar transports and stratagem specific stuff,
which they're going to be phasing out, right? Not aggressively yet. I don't think they're going to phase them out super aggressively yet, but I think we're getting to a point where they are.
Well, so Black Templars was the first time where they've actually technically phased out Firstborn units because they gave you the Sword Brethren and Crusader Squad, and I can't remember if it's both or just one of them, but now
the Sword Brothers have gone. The Crusader Squad is still an option, so you can still take Firstborn Crusaders.
Yes, but not the Sword Brethren. Yeah, I knew it was one. It's interesting that they've done that and gone. Yeah, there's no rules for the old one. Ultimately, it doesn't matter though because you can still just run them as the new ones, whether they're Primaris or not.
Well, theoretically, right? The way you run them is you take Vanguard veterans, or you take company veterans, or you take, there are means by which you can still legitimately use that squad, or you just use the Primaris rules for your old unit. If you happen to be one of those rare people who still owns the original Sword Brethren unit, just run it as whatever you want to run it as, whether it is that you want to run them as Vanguard vets or whether it is that you want to run them as the Primaris variant. I don't think anyone's going to massively mind under the circumstances, but yeah, it was an interesting release schedule. And I suppose the way, so to talk about it from a miniatures perspective, what we've just kind of discussed there, plus a few little one-off bits here and there, a few special releases, represents the full extent of the release schedule for this year. And no one's going to necessarily suggest that there wasn't good stuff in there. I think majoritively there was a good amount of stuff, but I think certainly it took a long time to get up to speed. Like we didn't see any significant range releases until the sisters, and then subsequently the orcs, and now the sort of Templars. So that's been great. But I think innately the thing is with like orc armies and sisters armies and all this other stuff, it just, I don't know, none of it felt, well, the orcs felt pretty significant, but everything else sort of was a bit like, oh yeah, cool. Now, admittedly, I've not started seeing Black Templars in the wild yet because, I've seen one or two of them, but not aggressively at this point. So I don't know what the impact of them is, but I think certainly what they're teasing for 2022 has got me quite excited in terms of the sorts of releases that we're kind of staring down the barrel of 2022 at. But before we get into that, which is going to be a segment in and of itself, what was your general vibe, Phil, on the release schedule in terms of miniatures for 40k in 2021? I mean, it felt all right to me, but I mean, a little lackluster some places, but overall.
Yeah, I think the thing that hampered it in terms of being an exciting release was that most of the time we'd either seen stuff like in advance and it just hadn't come out. Like the main issue is there's basically been a delay. It's like heavy intercessors, for example, we first saw them, or at least the rules for them, in the Space Marine Codex that came out last year. And then they're like 4 months later, maybe 5. Finally, they come out in the Kill Team box set. So it's like, oh, cool that they're finally here yet. It's like we've all been waiting for them. Same with like the speeders and stuff, and a lot of the other units, like the Orc stuff. A lot of the stuff had been previewed, and then it finally comes out. So I think that's why it probably feels a bit more underwhelming than anything. What was also interesting with some of the Space Marine stuff that came out early doors is like you got a brand new Eradicator and Blade Guard kits that are multi-part in comparison to the ones that everyone already owns, which were the easy build. It's weird that they're almost like so flippant with Space Marines that they can afford to do 2 versions of the same kit and know that they're still going to sell them. Whereas it's like you wouldn't ever get that with, another army.
No.
You don't get easy build. I mean, I could be wrong. I assume you don't get easy build Necrons, and then that they've done other versions of Necrons later. I think they did 3 Death Guard minis when they first came out, like for the painting stuff as standalone things. But beyond that, they're pretty much all like the exact same kit that you can actually finally buy when they came out as individual kits.
So Necrons have 3 Necron warriors that are easy build that you get when you buy the Necron paint set.
Oh, and there's a secret 4th one, which you get when you buy the Warhammer 40k intro magazine that costs $8.99. Or $10.99, depending on where you get it from. I know that because you also get, because I bought it basically, for the extra Space Marine Assault Intercessor, who's got a very cool but completely unique pose that you can't get anywhere else.
Those are the one with the assault symbol molded into the shoulder pad, right?
Yes.
Or the fast attack. Whatever it is,
I think he has got it on that. Actually, I'm not too sure about him. Have I got it to hand? I don't think I do. But the ones that came with the paint boxes do have that for sure. I'm not too sure about this guy. Probably, I would assume.
Probably. But yeah, I think anyway, all things being equal, I think the release schedule for 2021 was okay. I think, and it's interesting because you raised an interesting point in terms of the fact that they still had a bunch of Marine stuff that they were cycling through in the early part of the year. And, we saw a number of those releases dropping as the year kind of went along. And I think, it's been interesting in that regard to sort of see how that's all kind of come about. I found the Warhammer magazine that you're referring to, and it is a Space Marine Assault Intercessor, and he doesn't have the molded shoulder pad.
A rarity.
It's quite a nice sculpt actually for what it is, with the gun pointed out.
No,
It
exactly,
nice.
exactly. That's why I got it. I was like,
they've done quite a good paint job on it as well. What's unique about this warrior then? He's just pointing his gun especially forwards, is he?
Yeah, it's like, I think it's supposed, because he's standing as opposed to running, right? If I remember correctly.
Well, he's got a bit of a plod on. He looks like he's got a bit of a stride going.
Yeah,
it's
more the arm pose of the gun, which I was like, oh, that's pretty cool and unique.
Yeah.
I'll get that. Yeah, I feel like if you're a diehard Xenos player and you only collect one army, you can sort of rightfully, and you're not orcs basically, this year you'd be like, oh, cool, at best.
Or Necrons.
I mean, if you Necrons or them, but anyone else, it's like, cool, I get one character as part of my release. It's like, yeah, sorry, join the rest of the club of everyone else that isn't Space Marines. And as a guard player, I've been in that situation many a time when a Codex release comes around, and it's like, you don't get anything, or you get a character, or you get something, but it's not a lot.
Yeah.
Basically, it's like you got to really just get on the Space Marine bandwagon if you want to be someone that wants to regularly buy miniatures. You either need multiple armies, like 2 or 3, or you just do one army and you slowly paint it up to a really high standard, and that can take you years. Or just take whatever army you love plus Space Marines, and then you'll have a whale of a time.
It's unfortunately the way of the hobby. Everyone needs more Space Marines, and Games Workshop are happy to sell them to you. But yeah, I think the 2021 release schedule has been interesting. There's been a few beautiful moments in terms of special releases and things that have really kind of stood out. I think the Gaunt's Ghost squad, for example,
stunning, really good minis.
Yeah, incredible. And that's the thing. There's been some really beautiful releases overall. So it's not to suggest that there's not been fun stuff that's been there for us to kind of get on board with. I just think, I think a lot of the times the Codex releases have just felt a little bit limp. And I think that's the problem. It's like when you compare what we're seeing with Age of Sigmar, where every release is this big, exciting, range coming out. Now, obviously, they are also cycling through refreshing the battle tomes for the newer editions. So when they go, here's battle tome Iron Jaws, they're not necessarily gonna throw loads of new Iron Jaw units into the mix.
Here's the thing with AOS. Once they're sort of like one and done factions, once you've got your initial release, that you don't really get anything new for them. Like Fire Slayer's got a furnace a year ago, I think. Iron Jaws got the Warhammer Plus limited edition model, and I think they maybe got another like store exclusive type mini at some other point. But beyond that, like, I don't think any of them have really had new minis when they go around to doing the like refreshing the battle tomes and stuff. So in a way, they're worse than 40k, but they also churn out so many new armies. Like it feels like way more. Like they're constantly growing the actual armies that exist within AOS, whereas 40k is you'll get maybe one new faction, an edition, maybe.
Yeah.
Like for 9th edition, we haven't had one yet, have we?
No,
we've had updates to stuff, but we haven't had a brand new faction.
Well, technically, all the way through 8th edition, we got nothing. Oh, we got Sisters. Chaos Knights.
Oh, Chaos Knights. Gene Stealer Cult was 7th edition, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Gene 8th edition was Death Guard, really.
Oh, yes, you're absolutely right.
That was like
their
big new release. So we had quite a lot in 8th edition, it feels like. So we had... Well, actually, was Gene Stealer Cult 7th edition, or was that 8th edition?
It was. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it might have even been 6th edition in its initial instance. Same with Mechanicus. They were like 6th, 7th edition.
But it feels like they've all grown in 8th edition quite substantially with all
absolutely.
releases. As opposed to... And plus giving us like, Death Guard and stuff like that. Whereas 9th edition, it's like, we're waiting. But I think with 9th edition, they're just going to refresh all the factions that have got quite outdated.
And that definitely is what you kind of feel when you look at 9th at the moment. It's rare that they're adding new things. It's more just about updating the old stuff. It's like, this is too old now. It's time to fix it. And that's obviously what we're going to see with Craftworlds. That is the nature of it. It's just going to be, here's a bunch of stuff you already have, but we're just making it better in better sculpts, so on and so forth.
I wouldn't be surprised if you do get some new stuff like the, what do we call them, novitiates for sisters, and the war stuff. So it's like, I think you might find you'll get a complete refresh, but maybe not straight away, but then later on, a year later, because you always get part 2 to these things. And in that
we can talk about that. We can talk about that when we get onto the 2022 stuff. But one of the other things that's really interesting this year, and the thing that we've obviously should talk about as well, because it is 40k adjacent. It has 40k in the title. It's Kill Team, of course. Really weird year for Kill Team, because we got Kill Team Nexus, which was the Kill Team box set release with the heavy intercessors and flailed ones, and a whole bunch of weird Necron terrain that was obviously usable on the cardboards, the cardboard board that you could use with it. And that had a really interesting rules update for Kill Team of Old because they gave you new rules for all the new Marine stuff, all the new Necron stuff. They basically were like, hey guys, buy this book and it's going to update all your Marines, it's going to update all your Crons, it's going to update everything that we've kind of done. It's a whole load of new Kill Team stuff. Yay, Kill Team, it's exciting and fun. And then 2 months later, 3 months later, they go, forget about that rubbish. Kill Team. And it's like, right, okay, cool. So really weird play from GW in terms of Kill Team, right? Like
By
it just
weird,
sort of
you mean
feels like,
really bad?
I don't know if I would call it bad. I just think it's weird that I think it's strange because Kill Team right now, and again, maybe this is indicative of my own kind of gaming circles, but Kill Team just doesn't feel like it's hit the zeitgeist the same way as old Kill Team did. It felt like when they released Kill Team for 8th edition that people really cared about it and were really engaged with it. Whereas it feels like early doors with Kill Team for 9th edition, I think people bought into it because they wanted the terrain, they wanted the minis, but I don't think anyone is really playing it, especially. It doesn't feel to me like there's a big groundswell of people getting excited to play Kill Team games. Although I acknowledge that people are, I'm just saying I'm not really feeling it the same way as when the first Kill Team came along.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you, but then I'm not going to a gaming club to see what the temperature of Kill Team's like. I know lots of people are into it, and those that are loving it.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I again, this is like my point about Blood Angels. I'm not saying that I don't like it. I'm not saying that anyway. I'm just saying that space vampires. I'm just saying that I'm not really seeing it myself. It's like I've never.
Yeah.
So now I've seen some people playing Kill Team, but I'm not. I'm not seeing people get excited about it personally.
I think the issue is what they've done differently is this time they've gone, here's a big expensive box full of terrain, full of 2 new units. There you go. 3 months later,
but that was
here's another big box of stuff with 2 more units in and some terrain. Here you go. What they did so well in the original Kill Team was, here's a big box of stuff, and everyone really wanted the terrain because it was so like brand spanking new and like updated the whole ruins for 40k. 40k players was like, cool. But they also did, here's all these Killzone like expansion packs for like cheap terrain. Then they did, here's all your mini war bands, here's all your Kill Teams like as individual units with cards that you can buy. The buy-in for Kill Team seemed really like easy. Like I can just buy a Kill Team. I've got the rules, comes with it. I've got cards, got tokens in that little box set with the Kill Team. Like cool. Like with this, it's like you've got to buy the box, then you've got to buy the compendium, which has data sheets inside it, like printed. It's like they don't come as cards. It's like really unwieldy, and it hasn't got that almost like, or dare I say, collectible card game aspect to the original one, where it's like off the shelf. I can pick up the rule book if I wanted to be cheap. I could pick up a Kill Team. I could pick up a Kill Zone as like my little purchases. These are mine. My mate can do the same. We've now got 2 or 3 different sets of terrain between us. Instead, it's just these big box releases, which I actually think is hampering how Kill Team gets played. Like if you want to play Kill Team, you've either got to buy a big box set, or you've got to buy the core rule book. You got to buy the little box of shaped shaped rulers,
measuring stick things.
You got to get that, and then you've got to buy a generic 40k box. Like that's not the same branding. Like the branding of Kill Team was so good. Here's your Kill Team, like Kill Team boxes, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Whereas now it's just pick up a 40k box. Now we don't, it's like that's a completely different system, like rules wise.
Well, that was the point I was going to get to as well, though, is I think that is the mistake, because the old Kill Team basically was using a lot of familiar concepts for established 40k players. it was fundamentally a reordered or remade version of the core kind of 40k concepts in terms of stat lines and all the rest of it, right? A Primaris Marine in Kill Team had 2 wounds. A Primaris Marine in 40k has 2 wounds. It hit on freeze, it, you know, moves 6. The differences was the way that the sequences transpired, the specialities that you could adorn those characters with, so you could make them like snipers or demolition experts or whatever it was, right? You added that, you sprinkled that layer on top of it. And then, you know, it wasn't like a weird barrier to entry. It wasn't like me going, right, my Space Marine moves 2 square. You know, I hit on a roll of a whatever, you know, like the whole way that the units are being expressed is, you know, a whole new way of thinking. And again, I've heard a lot of people saying this new Kill Team system is really good. You and me need to play it at some point, mate. That's
for sure.
That's a task that lays ahead of us in January at some point. But the point is that we are in an interesting time for Kill Team, because I like what they're doing with some of the releases. I think the first box set was extraordinarily good. I think the second box set was a little lackluster, but I think you can definitely say that their heart was in the right place. And I think future updates to Kill Team in terms of the squads that they're going to be releasing going to be really exciting. But the thing about Kill Team that really, really sucks is the fact that they phoned in the initial index release so badly. Like, anyone I've spoken to on the topic of Kill Team has essentially said that, yeah, there are 4 kill teams, and then there is all the rest of it. And all the rest of it just has nowhere near the flexibility or creativity or options that you are afforded if you have one of the 4 kill teams.
What's weird is actually there's a bunch of kill teams in White Dwarf that have that kind of same level of rules mechanics. Yeah, they did. There's definitely an Adeptus Mechanicus / Guitari one in there that has all the data sheets again printed out. But yeah, it's like the complexity of the kind of guardsmen or commandos is there, and it's like they're releasing them in White Dwarf, and it's like I sort of get it. It's like the compendium was meant to really just be an index to get you started, but I think because of that, people are a bit like, it's not very interesting. Like, you want it to be a bit more special,
especially for the price of admission, right? Like, it's not an inexpensive book. And again, the old Kill Team had all of those basic kind of beginner rules in the same book.
And they didn't because I think it didn't take long to people to cotton on to the fact, like, you're going to buy this, it's a stopgap until they give you a specific kill team for that faction, which will be much more interesting. So I'm a bit like, not fussed. And like, unless you're playing one of the new ones, I'm not fussed about playing. Oh, I haven't bought the compendium. I've got no intention of playing those effectively old style kill teams. And they also actually kind of changed the play style and loadout. So if you had a pre-existing kill team, there's a chance it isn't even compatible with the new rules.
I think the thing that's really weird as well, though, is like, I think Games Workshop have just done everything wrong when it comes to Kill Team in terms of giving us as a, you know, consumer-based confidence in our purchasing decisions. It's like Kill Team has just been this thing that they just kind of roll out, and then they just slap every update on it under the sun over the course of time, and it just becomes bloated, and you've gone through that cycle with it. You just know that you're going to become disenfranchised with it because of the way that they're going to treat it long term. And again, in a way, it's sort of indicative of what they do with 40k as well, which is, you know, they sort of begin and then over time it becomes crazy bloated, and then they have to sort of start again. And that's sort of where they're at with Kill Team. But then, you know, the original Kill Team ended with like 6 core rule system books to it. You had Kill Team Elite, Kill Team Leaders or HQs or whatever it was, Kill Team Arena, Kill Team Rogue Trader, and then Kill Team Pariah Nexus or whatever it was. I think the whole thing was like, it just went mad.
But at least with that, each one was like an expansion that you could choose not to buy. So with the original Kill Team, I just got the original base game. I never bothered with any of the expansions. I sort of liked the look of a couple of them, but I knew I didn't play frequently enough to make it worth my while. Whereas with this one, it's they've subtly updated the rules. So the one that they came out with, Tau and Sisters, right? They added on a bunch of extra rules to make up for the fact that the terrain is much taller, which effectively breaks the mechanics of how you need to get onto the terrain, because it's over the square or circle measurement that you would otherwise need to do. So they've given you some extra rules for that, and like there's I think it's like extreme vantage point or something, because you're so high up, you get extra rules for basically being if you want to be a sniper up there. And it's like, that's cool, but you haven't, as far as I'm aware, they haven't released that for free. So if you want to technically get those rules, you'd have to buy a big box set just to get access to a couple of paragraphs.
Yeah, it's pretty mad. But there you go. Kill Team's been an interesting one. I think it's just because of the fact that they did the old Kill Team release and then so quickly proceeded in with new Kill
I
Team.
mean,
Like...
I just want to say, I think, it feels like the old prior Nexus release was a real like cynical marketing ploy, because they were like, people are going to buy this for heavy intercessors, so we're just going to put some other stuff in there. Like the terrain was terrible. I thought, like it's not compatible with 40k. Even if you're a Necron player, it's just like a bunch of barrels, effectively Necron themed barrels. It's like,
and doors.
Yeah, you don't need 50 of them. It's like if they had some like Necron walls or something to go inside it, to like the barricades and stuff, or even if it was along the lines of like the orc stuff that you got in the new Kill Team, like that would at least be viable in some way. But it's just like a bunch of stuff to sell Space Marines, and they're like, oh, we know it will sell. And there's literally no life expectancy on this game, because for, as you said, 3 months afterwards, like they completely gutted the whole system and started over again. So it's not like even it's a jump from like, second edition. No, I'm trying to think. It's not like it's a jump from 8th to 9th edition where it's all cross compatible. It's like the jump from 7th to 8th, where it's like you're gutting it and you're restarting because they're just not compatible. So if you bought that box set because you're a fan of Kill Team, you would feel probably quite annoyed of the lack of value for money you got out of that box. But then at the same time, you'd also be, quickly forgetting about it, because you'd be going, my shiny new toy of Kill Team 2. So it's like, it's, two sides of, the same coin. One's good, one's bad.
Yeah.
And you got to take them both, basically.
Yeah, but I think that's the thing. I think it just kind of trains people as towards how they think about these releases. And I think they've made Kill Team feel less significant as a result. And I think, don't get me wrong, I think there was a lot of excitement around the Kill Team reveal, but it has massively, in my estimates, dissipated at this point. I just don't think anyone is falling over themselves to be playing Kill Team right now that I'm aware of. Now, obviously, again, people out there will be enjoying it, and that's great. And this might be one of those weird Adeptus Titanicus things where it's the best game that no one's playing, and maybe there is a diehard Kill Team community out there, and I'm sure there is, but I'm not aware of it.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like with the original Kill Team, it was like there was so much stuff that they released in that first year. It felt like a very well supported system, but I think it was that case where it quickly fizzled out. It's like, we've released all the Kill Teams, we've released all the war zones. What else have we got left? Okay, a couple of expansions. We've run out of miniatures to put into new rules in terms of elites and HQs and stuff. Where else can we go? Okay, competitive play. Oh, what else after that? An update to Space Marines and Necrons? Okay. Whereas this feels now like a bit more of a sustained release of, you're not getting as much, like it's over a much slower period of time. It's every like 3 months, there's a box with a couple of bits in, and that's it. But that will last for years, because they can, that at that pace, because it's so slow, they can make sure there's always something to keep it going over time. But I think in doing
Yeah.
so just means the initial impact of Kill Team isn't as exciting as it was when you had all these Kill Teams and Kill Zone boxes that you could be buying, and cards and stuff like that.
I mean, I'm definitely buying it when the Corsairs Kill Team comes out, right? Like, that's happening, surely. Like, once that thing becomes reality. I mean, there's so many rumors about it at this point. I just can't believe that it's not true. Which is nice, because I've been, I've been talking about Corsairs coming back to Eldar for a long time, so I'm excited to see what that happens. But I'll jump in at that point. But other than that, yeah, Kill Team is much of a muchness to me at this point. Because again, I was someone who bought most of the expansions and kept ahead of the curve on Kill Team, and I just felt disappointed by the way that it just sort of, the Games Workshop were pushing these things on us as of April, May, and then July. They were basically July, August. They're like, oh yeah, forget about that. And don't forget as well, Phil, a real bad taste was left in my mouth as well by the way that they handled the whole Killzone situation. Because if you remember, that was the release where they basically false advertised Killzones and then retrospectively changed their website to pretend that they never did.
Yes, yeah, because they initially advertised the old ones that you could buy.
Yes.
But actually what you were getting were new ones that had less content in.
Yes.
For more money, because they actually raised the price of them.
And then you had to buy a book. You had to buy a book, remember, Phil, to run those kill zones.
Oh yeah. There was
So they were selling you a book for a bunch of boxes, and then when you bought the boxes to coincide with the book, you couldn't build the battlefields that they had actually illustrated in the book, because the book was a compendium of pages from the original Kill Teams with the contents of the original Kill Teams. So you didn't have enough crates or enough ruins or anything to build the actual battle zones.
Yeah.
It was an atrocious release. And again, I think, unfortunately, was, for me, the thing that has kind of soured Kill Team for me, and why I've not bought. It's very rare for me not to buy something 40k related, and I have not bought Kill Team.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when they first previewed those Kill Teams, I was like, oh, I really missed out on getting those. I really want to get some scenery for cheap, because scenery is crazy expensive. So I was really looking forward to it. And yeah, as you said, I was just left a bit disappointed, going, like, it's more expensive and there's less stuff in it. I just feel like I'd be mugging myself off if I bought it now, knowing that I could have bought it, 10 quid cheaper or 20 quid cheaper the year before or a couple of years before. Yeah. So I was like, no, I'm just not buying them. As tempting as it was, I was like, it just doesn't feel right. But also because some of the one that I really wanted was actually missing the cool bits that I wanted out of it. So it just seemed a bit pointless to buy it for, a bunch of pipes.
Yes. Yeah. But there you go. That was the Kill Team conundrum. The other thing that has obviously garnered, mixed feelings is the Warzone books. We don't necessarily need to dwell on this overall, but or too extensively, but there's been 4 Warzone books this year, or 5?
4,
4 or 5,
yeah, because they've done the Warzone Caradon and Warzone Octarius. Each one's got a different book, or as we realised today, 2 of them are called Book 1, Book 2, and the other 2 are called Act 1, Act 2. Why Games Workshop? You're doing this weird naming convention on the spines of the books.
Is this another thing that offended you?
It does. So it triggers my OCD. So I've got to post it on my socials, actually, just as a point of reference. Dan kindly gave me a limited edition Black Templars Codex last weekend, which I then inserted into my bookshelf of all the 9th edition codexes and the core rule book, only to discover that the 40k logo is like all white on the limited edition codex, which is the same for all the limited edition codexes, but all the others are like the standard logo. So you sort of look at it and it's like this really jarring white logo breaking up the consistency of the placement of all the others. And then Richie pointed out that the Warzone books, the first 2 were called Act 1, Act 2, and then the second 2 Octarius were called Book 1, Book 2. So weirdly inconsistent, and it's like just pick one. Even if you didn't like the first one, just stick with it.
Is that kind of stuff that keeps you awake at night?
I'm a designer, so it's like it's my job to keep me awake at night over those little things. It would,
but you didn't do it, Phil. This isn't your fault.
I know, but as a designer, I appreciate good aesthetics. So it's like it keeps me up at night knowing, it's just bad.
That someone in your creed is out there doing a terrible job.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah. Not, it's easily done, right? Just. Probably different people are working on these projects and they're not necessarily cross-referencing the other books to double check. I think I get why they've done it with a limited edition ones to make them stand out, but it effectively means you either need all the limited edition ones for consistency or not. And it's like, to me, I'm all about consistency. So that's why I like them all. It's like when 9th edition came out, I actually wanted to swap my limited edition rulebook for the standard one that you had to buy online or in shops because it didn't come in the Indomitus box, because I wanted the consistent cover artwork to all look the same, and the limited edition one kind of broke that up. That's how weird I am.
Well, I'm sorry I gifted you that Black Templar book, and it in turn led Richie to observe the differences between the war zones.
Basically, ruined my day.
Basically, that's it. That was the worst thing that was happening to you that day.
It's the worst thing that's happened.
Yeah, that's it. The Warzone books, though, right? There's a broader topic that I want to get into about the Warzone books, but we'll just talk about the Warzone books in isolation. Look, as someone who has been invested in the hobby for a long time, the idea of Games Workshop releasing compendiums of different rules in that kind of format is not alien to me, right? Like they've done this stuff loads. They've done loads of supplements. They've done loads of campaign books. This is par for the course. I mean, if you go back to the 7th edition World, they had the new rules for the Thousand Suns put in Wrath of Magnus, which also gave you rules for some Space Wolf stuff. They had the Monkai book give you all the new rules for the Imperial Guard, while also giving you new rules for Tau. This is common practice for Games Workshop over the years to do this sort of stuff. So for me, as a long-standing 40k gamer, I am not shocked by this business practice. However, I acknowledge that certain elements of how they've handled that release and the way that they've done it have not necessarily been as friendly for consumers as it otherwise should be. And I think if it were that in isolation, I don't think people would have been as negative about them as maybe they were. But I think that was kind of one of the things that came off the back of a bunch of other bad decisions that had led to an overarching negative vibe towards Games Workshop during the course of 2021. We won't necessarily need to get into all of the different things that contributed to that, but effectively the course of 2021 had a number of problems, and one of those was Warzone, right? Kill Team was the thing as well that we talked about. This all kind of came around then. But, I think a lot of Drukhari players were basically going, well, have I got to buy this so as I get all the rules from a Drukhari? It's like, well, it's just that's what they've done. I agree it's not great, but it's just what they've done. But for me, as myself, I like them because it gives Games Workshop's rules writing teams the chance to experiment and throw fun, interesting things into the mix. But I understand why people were frustrated about it. And I get it if you're the sort of person who wants to have all the rules for your army, why you would be frustrated that they're not just in one consolidated book. And the last thing I'm going to say about these releases and some of the things they do is it frustrates me when rules were given to you as part of your Warhammer Plus or Warhammer 40,000 app subscription, which are then subsequently re-released verbatim into one of these Warzone books and then subsequently are removed from the app. That drove me crazy. Like the fact that you had access to these rules via the Psychic Awakening books in the app one day, and then they put it in the Warzone book, and now all of a sudden you ain't got it anymore. That was bananas to me. That was probably one of the more offensive elements of the Warzone books for me. But overall, I'm okay with it. But then I'm a bit of a Games Workshop apologist when it comes to stuff like this, because I'm just sort of, I'm too Stockholm syndromed at this point to be overly aggressive about it. But you know, the core concept of what they are doesn't massively offend me, but I get why newer players might be, you know, disenfranchised by these releases. But I mean, what did you think of the Warzone release?
Yeah, I mean, personally, I didn't mind it so much. I found it was a nice, you know, I kind of love campaign books. I like to read them. I very rarely get the chance to play them, but I like to read them pretending I'm going to play them. And then hopefully one day I can convince everyone to do some games from them. I like that they're sort of being a bit more experimental with the armies of renown. I think that's a really cool concept. I think the fundamental flaw is timing with the Warzone books. I think people are annoyed that they're coming out ahead of actual codexes. You know, people seem to think, why are the rules writers spending time doing these instead of writing, you know, the actual codexes for, like, you know, Tau or Elder or Guard or Chaos, for example. You know, I don't think they're necessarily mutually exclusive. There might literally be a dedicated team or one or two people, say, doing those books, and the people doing the codexes is a separate group of people, potentially. I mean, I don't actually know. But I think I think you're right that a lot of people are like, I want to just buy a codex and all my rules for all my units should just be in there. And ideally that should be valid for an entire edition of the game, if not a bit more. And normally in the past, historically, with other editions of the game, as you pointed out, when they release new units for a pre-existing faction, they need to put those rules in print somewhere. So that's where the concept of the campaign books kind of comes from. Like, all of a sudden they can sling them in here, like Vigilus. Oh, there's some new Chaos stuff. There's minus Calgar. Let's put them in there. You can buy it. So you got a physical version, because their whole rules release system is wedded pretty much to print media, which is a flaw in itself, which maybe we'll talk about another time. But that's their main issue. So if they had, you know, if you were a Sisters player or Drukhari player, your codex came out, brilliant, you would be happy and you wouldn't be complaining about anything. If in a year's time, that Warzone book with your armies of renowned or regiment of renowned, is that armies of renowned? Armies of renowned. If that came out in a year's time, you wouldn't be complaining. Because I think a lot of people say day one DLC, because I guess that's the comparison. It's rules that I use for my army. It's literally coming out at the same time my codex is, and that's the bit that feels a bit egregious to people, I think. Whereas if it came out at a later date, I don't think anyone would care, because some people would probably be like, oh, cool, new stuff, like, oh, like a bit of a refresh, it's changing the meta. But instead, you don't have the stabilization of your initial codex dropping and then the shake up with the extra rules coming at a later date. It's just, I sort of get that they're trying to do it as this is a companion piece. Like, this is your codex. Here's some campaign rules for your codex. Here's some cool army rules if you want them. You don't need them. But I think when it comes to match play rules, people are like, if it's for my army, I need it, whether or not it's any good. However, I think most of the armies of renown have proven to be pretty good. So it's almost like essential buying. I think the price point is a bit of a factor for people. Yeah, I mean, they're all right books, I think. I think if the armies of renowned were like Crusade rules only, and you couldn't use them in match play or tournaments, no one would care about these, because no one cares about.
Well, they wouldn't sell either, right? That's the problem.
Yeah,
nowhere near.
I mean, that's probably that's probably a fair point as well. So
yeah, they have to support the match play format, because that's the cash cow. No one is buying books in the same volume than those that want to use them for rules purposes. That's just the nature of the beast. Not that you won't be using them for rules purposes if you're playing Crusade, because obviously you need them for the Crusade. But the point is that, yeah, max play sort of rules the roost on that. And one of the wider points, and I wanted to get into this, and this is probably a podcast topic in and of itself, so let's not necessarily labor the point, because it's potentially something that we can explore more extensively in the future. But my frustration with these books, as well as a bunch of other avenues in which Games Workshop is kind of communicating things. And this only really became apparent to me when we started talking with Tim about getting into Necromunda, because I have not been following Necromunda. And we are now in a situation where, because of Tim's intrigue and interest in the topic of Necromunda, that we might well start playing some Necromunda soon. And all of a sudden we're asking ourselves, how does one get into Necromunda? And we were met with, it's a little bit complicated because there's a lot of variance to it. That is massively more so the case with 40k right now. And my concern with this style of release at the moment is I think we're creating, or rather not we, Games Workshop, are creating a barrier to entry that might start to get difficult for people to overcome at the moment. I think the sheer volume of content and releases and the different avenues by which Games Workshop are releasing this content has made getting into 40k 9th edition probably one of the most difficult editions to get into since 7th edition. Like I think it's really, really difficult. There's just too much.
Yeah, I mean, pre-Psychic Awakening, sort of say midpoint of 8th edition, you had your rulebook, you had a codex, and if it came out, you had Vigilus. And you probably only bought the first one, because the second, unless you were a Chaos player, basically. And that was it. Like,
well, yeah, but you even then still had FAQs and things,
yeah,
right? Like,
I mean, yeah, in terms of sort of stuff you would buy, it would be those, because you didn't have Space Marine supplements or anything like that. There wasn't any.
No, not pre-2019.
There was a barrage or deluge even of FAQs to kind of keep ahead of. But if you were someone that didn't care about that, you're a lot more of a casual gamer, you could just take these things and be like, fine, this is it. I think we've all noticed this year, especially maybe more of the early part of it, like a real 40k fatigue of people just going, like, I'm so bored of 40k. And I think that was partly because they weren't releasing many models, but they were just churning out rules left, right, and center, and trying to keep up with that, like, sort of knowledge about what's coming out or what's hot, what's, what are certain rules, what are the combos. It's actually quite difficult.
Yeah, I just don't understand how anyone gets into it anymore. I have no idea how a new player with no exposure to any of 40k prior to this moment in time gets into it. Like, I just don't know how you do it, because it's just too vast. It's like literally utterly impenetrable at this point, in my opinion, to get into it. And I think that's the weird thing. Like, you take it, I know we've started turning into people that kind of romanticizing certain aspects of 8th edition. And God, if you go back and listen to early episodes of this podcast, you're going to hear me saying that there's a lot of problems with 8th edition, because 8th edition wasn't perfect. But the one thing it was easy to get into. Like, you didn't need much. You just needed the pamphlet that was the rules, and you needed your book. Now, okay, you probably then also needed an FAQ, and maybe there were some points changes, and there were some other things that were floating around online, and they did start to bloat it towards the end. But 2017, 2018, a good chunk of 2019, the game was pretty easy to get your head around. Now it's just gone. Like, the span of time of 2019, so in the year 2020 to 2021, the game has just become a monstrosity again. And it's just crazy to think that, if I want to run Tyranids now, right? Say I want to run Tyranids, I've got to turn up, right? Say most Tyranid armies probably aren't going to utilize a Forge World unit, so I'm going to discount that from the mix. But I'm going to need Tyranid Codex. I'm going to need my... actually, they amalgamated this, didn't they, within the latest...
So the Warzone Critical Mass has all the Psychic Awakening stuff in there, so you don't need the old Psychic Awakening books.
Fine. So, okay, in that case then, so I can discount that. So, but I still need the Critical Mass books. I need, depending on what I'm running, I need my White Dwarf supplement that they just did.
Which we
be able to run.
Probably should cover at some point. Maybe obviously next year at some point.
One day, we'll get Tim on to talk about that at some point, and so on, or Phil, maybe not you, obviously, other Phil. But yeah, anyway, point is like, yeah, and then, but the point, I mean, okay, Nids maybe aren't as bad an example as some, but the point is that it's now become that thing.
Well, okay, well, if you want to be awkward, you could be like, okay, Guard, for example, you got your old 8th edition codex, you've got your Imperial Armor compendium from Forge World, because you most likely will have a bit of Forge World in there. You've got Psychic Awakening books for your tank cases. You've got, if you're Cadian specifically, you've got the it wasn't Critical Masses one before that, but you got your Warzone Octarius book for your new Regiments of Renowns. Codex supplements.
No,
Codex
that was
supplement.
it was Codex supplement.
So you got all of that basically.
And say you want to put an Inquisitor in there, chuck in another load of stuff.
That's the thing. If you want to do Inquisition Assassins, which quite often you might want to take, you've got to get those from other sources, like other books. And then also you've got your GT mission pack. If you're playing
of course.
If you want to play a Crusade game, you've probably got another bunch of Crusade mission packs that you could potentially choose. There's a lot of choice with 9th edition. That's good, but it's also bad because people love new rules, but people don't like buying or having to lug rules around. And yeah, there's this, everyone talks about it as bloat, and it is a thing, and I think it just wears on people over time.
Yeah, I agree.
Even if it's like not necessarily just them in their armies, it's like their opponents, or they're just seeing the releases happen. And if there's someone that's quite casual that, isn't on Warhammer community every single day, if you went on holiday for like a month, say, lucky you. But if you came back, you'd just be a bit lost, like, as to what's happened in 40k, because it changes so quick. The pace is pretty relentless.
Well, this is the thing, right? We are a month away from the next quarterly update that's going to have another massive impact on the game. Like, it's just that thing where I just think we've gotten to a point where it's like, and again, I know people may look down on me when I make these sorts of grand sweeping statements, but just sort it out, Games Workshop. Like, there's no reason for your game to be this bloated or this broken. Like, find a set of principles and build your game accordingly.
Well, I think they are trying to do 3 games in one, right? They're trying to do open play, match play, and narrative/crusade.
Yeah, build systems accordingly. Have separate teams. Like, bring staff in who only worry about one version.
Well, yeah, but I also think it's almost like if those Warzone books were just crusade books, they might not sell as well, but at least you're selling them to the people that want them, as opposed to making people buy them because they feel like they need to. It also, isn't upsetting the balance of the meta for the tournament scene as much. So I mean, you could compartmentalize things a bit more, or go, there's match play. Tournament play is literally its own thing. But then they could still potentially churn out all this stuff. But it's like, cool, it's Crusade, don't care. Or, it's tournament. This is a tournament book, don't care. Or you go, I love it because that's what you're into. Like, then they're still putting out as much as they currently are, but people can compartmentalize whether they want it or not.
That's fair. Cool. All right, so that's Warzone. So keeping it 40k related, I reckon we probably should just move into a sort of general summary of 2021. I'm sure people listening will be like, but what about Warhammer Plus? Warhammer Plus is its own thing, but it obviously does have an impact on the Warhammer 40,000 hobby. But it's not 40k specific, although again, it's 40k adjacent. They've got a lot of 40k content, but it has had an impact on, I suppose, the general health of the community and the perception of Games Workshop. And I think, we're not trying to shy away from suggesting that, or rather, we're not trying to shy away from talking about it. It just doesn't necessarily directly influence 40k massively, But I think myself and Phil were pretty aligned on the fact that as a service, it's fine. It's nothing remarkable. I think they released it far too prematurely. I think it would have made more sense for them to have created content, to have distributed on other better established media platforms, because I just don't understand why a company that is as small as Games Workshop is in a broader sense would feel like they wanted to create their own subscription service where they're selling people, TV shows and all the rest of it, when there's already so many well-established business models out there. So that was a bit bewildering to me. But the point is that Warhammer Plus is fine. It's not great. The stuff they did with the animation community seems to be, dissipating now. If it seems like Games Workshop are having an about face on how they're treating their community of content creators who want to animate based on the 40k and other Games Workshop IPs, which is good to see. But yeah, look, I mean, Warhammer Plus has been a bit of an own goal. I think, some of the series that they've got on there, generic Space Marine titled thing, Blood Quest, whatever it is. What's it called again, Phil?
Angels of Death.
Angels of Death, thank you. I always forget the name of that show. It's how memorable it is to me. But the point... It's a good show, though, right?
It is. I just finished watching
it
today, and I was like, here's the thing, story-wise, 9 or 10 out of 10. It's like really good story overall.
10 out of 10.
Well,
Phil.
I mean,
can you give me a benchmark? What other stories would you give a 10 out of 10 in the world of in the world of film and TV media?
Oh, man, you're asking.
Are you talking like season 1 Game of Thrones or something?
Okay, yeah, it's not that, but let's say a solid 7 or 8 then. It's
all right. Okay, so Game of Thrones season 1 is a 10.
In terms of 40k stories, which tend to be a bit, hit or miss. It's not bad. It's got some interesting stuff to it.
So you're altering your standards by a 40k.
It's like when you play a 40k game. Is it a good game or is it a good 40k game? Yeah, it's a good 40k game. Right, I'll take it. I think it's good. There's some really janky bits in it, like some of the faces are a bit off, or the voice syncing, like lip syncing, isn't great, but I don't mind that. I know it really bugs some people. Things like some particle effects and explosions can just look a bit dodgy at times, and then towards the end, you're a bit like, was this a bit rushed? Who knows? But I mean, I can forgive all that because I'm like, it's what, 5-6 hours worth of animation. Like that's a big project. Like that's a lot. So I'm quite impressed with it,
especially for like the one person that worked on it, right?
And
like,
I've said it before, I'll say it again. When the trailer first dropped, we both absolutely hated it, thought it looked rubbish. I was like, what?
But again, we were judging it against the standards of things like Astartes and other bigger productions, but we didn't realize at the time that Games Workshop was still basically keeping the same kind of production philosophies or production methodologies in play, which is, we got this one individual, and this one individual is making everything. And that's it. And it's like, okay, someone else wrote aspects of the story. Obviously, they had voice actors. It's not, this one individual knew everything, but maybe it was like one individual with a small support staff of, people within the GW organization.
But it's honestly, I think it's pretty good. Like I found it really enjoyable, and I was sort of pleasantly surprised. And the more I watched, the more I enjoyed it. There's some really stunning visuals in it as well. Like it's not really spoilers. Like there's a bit where a guy succumbs to the Black Rage. Like
spoilers.
We've all, I won't talk about the quiz. But like the visuals of that is like phenomenal. Like how they've interpreted that actually happening. I was like, wow, right, this is cool. This is cool stuff. So yeah, I finished watching it. I was like, I'd be quite happy if this is a one-off, and it's quite compartmentalized. They do sort of tease an extra thing so they could do a second season. But I'm at the same time like, you could just leave it as it's one-off and just have that guy
like Squid Games,
do another thing. Like the story is good enough on it in its own right; it doesn't need to carry on. But I could see it. Them trying to make it like a bit of a franchise, a bit like Astartes. Like let's do a second, a follow-up story to it and stuff, which I think could be cool. If you're going to go down that line, I'm like, do a hero series of minis for all the characters, like something like that. That's how you need to like monetize that stuff. Turn it into miniature form, basically. It's like the circle is complete. It's
the circle
is the animation based on models, but then you make models based on the animations. That's how it works.
It's a beautiful synergy. But then on my Squid Game point that I made earlier, like that sort of was the thing with Squid Games at the end, wasn't it? They kind of felt like they were just kind of shoehorning in the idea that sequels inbound, which obviously it will be. It's a global phenomenon. It's not.
I mean, it wasn't as sequel baited as heavily as that. It was like a tiny little story tease, I would say.
Yeah. Well, I felt the same thing with like the first series of Stranger Things. Like I felt like at the end of the first series of Stranger Things, they basically decided that they were going to do another one, so they did this sequence where the sheriff character, who I forget the name of, had to go out into the woods and leave, Waffalos in a field somewhere, and it was that thing where it's like that feels so shoehorned onto the end, and maybe that's the same with this situation. But I'm going to predict it though, Phil. I want to be wrong, but I think the next series of Squid Games is going to be rubbish.
Lightning and Bottle is hard to do.
Mate, that show, my goodness, that is a broader 2021 topic that we don't really want to necessarily get into because it's big, but phenomenal show. I just can't believe that they can keep that going into a sequel. I just don't understand how you could do it. But hey, I'm really excited to be proven wrong. Right, look, there you go. So Warhammer Plus, look, we get it. It's getting better. I'm still a subscriber. I'm looking forward to getting my Orc War Boss at some point, and you'll get your Vindicare Assassin at some point. And I've stopped watching it. I've not logged on to any of the Warhammer Plus services in over 3 months.
Today was the first time I've done it in a while to catch up on like the second half of Angels of Death. There's some new cool looking Hammer and Bolter that I want to watch. But basically once they stopped sort of pushing out Hammer and Bolter every week, I kind of dwindled off and didn't really have a reason to go back. I was looking back at all the sort of releases that they've put out for like the Vault and stuff, and I was like, beyond the initial release of me casually perusing the Vault with all its White Dwarf subscriptions and other stuff, I haven't gone back to look. Like the navigation's clunky. It's really difficult to find stuff. It's not in any particular order. Like if you could search for articles in White Dwarf, like show me all the heavy metal articles, show me all the painting guides. Oh my god, that would be so useful. Like, and their back catalog would be phenomenal if they could do that, but they won't because they're just all PDFs uploaded.
Well, again, it's that requires them spending money on development, and at the moment a lot of it's just off the shelf solutions. It's sort of cheap they're more or less, it's like a WordPress website, right? Like it's it's like they went to Wix or whatever it was and just got it done through that. It's
not great, the Vault. I mean, if you're into it, it's cool. The thing and this was expectations on me and not false promises on Games Workshop, but not being very clear those books that are old expansions, even like Malign Portents, AOS 1 stuff, it's just lore and art. They've stripped out all the old edition rules.
Yeah, but they don't want to give away old rule sets because you might play.
Well, but I mean, they didn't explicitly ever say when they advertised it, when they talked about it on the live stream, they didn't ever say this does not include the rules that come in that. They just said you get the book, here you go, if you want to read about it you can. And then they sort of say vaguely, oh yes, you can learn about the lore, but they don't explicitly ever state ever in any of their marketing material that yes, this is just the lore, it doesn't include the rules. And I had to go back through the articles, rewatch the Twitch stream at least twice now. I've done it just to double check that I wasn't going mad, or that they haven't stealth updated the blog post to edit out where they might have said it. And I was like, have I just misheard this? And it's not that I misheard, it's just that they weren't very explicit about it. So they were very vague. So actually, when the Vault came out, I was actually really disappointed because I was a bit like, I want to go down memory lane. Like, I actually kind of want to get rid of my physical copies of Gathering Storm, but instead I sort
Mm.
of now feel obliged to keep hold of them just for the portion of the rules, even if we're never going to use them because we're never.
Oh, I'd like to use them.
Well,
again,
exactly. So part of me is like, one day maybe I would like to play 7th edition, and I would like access to those rules. And if,
as long as we don't use any of the formations, it's an okay game.
So,
and some of the codexes are pretty busted as well.
But
But
it just left me with a bit of a bad taste in my mouth, like a bit like, oh no, that's disappointing. Like, I get why they've done it, but they sort of set my expectations up wrong.
Yeah, no, I hear you, pal. I don't think that's broadly the case with a lot of that stuff.
They did.
Another thing.
I was just sorry to interrupt. They did a similar thing with that they at launch or just prior to launch, they did stay on the website like, oh, they're going to do animations weekly, and then they updated it to say most weeks, so they can get away with the weeks where they haven't updated, or done any animations.
Yeah, which is that retrospective altering of their advertising is really interesting, or rather their promotional material, because it kind of shows a willfulness on their part that. And it's weird, right? Like, because us as a community don't necessarily really hold them to account for it, but that kind of stuff isn't really very appropriate, right? You shouldn't be releasing lies and then retrospectively going back and changing them, and because again, like it's just a bad
at
look.
least without acknowledging it, to say, yeah, sorry, we told you this, but we've changed.
If you acknowledge it, then you could be held accountable for that. It's better just. I mean. The whole thing's just weird. I find a great example.
Yuri Adventurous?
A great example. No. Well, I mean, obviously that's one thing, but obviously, that whole weird face change thing, which was funny. But that was 2020 though, not 2021. So we're not going to talk about it now. But maybe it was 2021. Oh, right, fine. Well, yeah, they changed his face. But the point I was going to get to more is the Warhammer 40,000 app that has apparently, as of now, supposed to support the Crusade system in depth. Doesn't do it at all.
Yeah,
that Warhammer 40,000 app is rubbish.
I was going to bring this up. They don't state it supports. They said we're laying the foundations for Crusade, which I think they said pretty much at the beginning of the year. And it's like, it might do technically in the back end on the database, but we've not seen any of it. It's been over a year since Crusade launched as part of 9th edition. And, this year, one of my key takeaways is that Crusade is great. Everyone should play more Crusade. I know you have a different opinion on it, but I'm a bit like, I feel like they need to support Crusade more, and not having it in the app, again, is a barrier to entry, just in terms of how do you manage your armies. There's some other websites that might do it for you. Or like, how do you build an army? Because the army builder within the app is really clunky. It's like you've got to go to Battlescribe or somewhere else, and it's like, no, Games Workshop should be putting out the best version of this and not relying on third parties to do it for them. The app just feels like it's getting worse in terms of bugs in there and mistakes that seem to exist.
Did you hear something? I mean, on the topic of apps, did you hear something funny that people are now saying that the guy who created Battlescribe has gone off the grid?
Yeah, I heard that a few months ago. I've not seen any updates on it.
Well, that's the thing, though, because Battlescribe itself has not been updated as an application in ages, right? Like, that's the broad consensus I'm hearing, is that, I mean, it's weird because obviously all my updates happen automatically while I'm asleep, and who knows what other software is getting put on there to monitor everything that I do and one day, enslave me to whatever. But the point is that, if that app isn't being updated, certainly on like the Apple platforms to accommodate for new kind of software, changes, eventually, if it is that the guy who's released Battlescribe has essentially gone off the grid and isn't updating his application anymore, there'll come a point where you can't use it on modern operating systems, which will be an interesting conundrum, because then we'll all be stuck.
Well, yeah, basically, because Apple's really good at like certain versions of apps just get phased out every time they release a new OS, so that could happen. I mean, I think I joked ages ago, Games Workshop just silently like slipped him some money to not do any updates. So over time, it will just eventually disappear, and it won't be anyone's faults.
Well, I got my reminder the other day. It's like, oh, your support subscription thing is coming to an end, and I remembered that whole point about Battlescribe maybe going off the grid at some point. But yeah, Warhammer Plus is it's I'm not Warhammer Plus, sorry, Warhammer 40,000's app, the whole app. It's abysmal. It's a terrible application that I try and use it, but it's the most unuser friendly thing. It's awful.
It's great if you just use the search function to find a unit entry,
and you know exactly how to spell exactly what you're looking for in the exact way it's written. Like, you can't say Terminator Chaplain, you have to say Chaplain in Terminator armor.
There's lots of weird oddities that it's like, if you want to find a weapon, you could probably search for it, but once you found that weapon profile, you can't then find any associated units that use that weapon. So you kind of need to know what the unit is to begin with, if you want to find that weapon. Otherwise, or if you go, if you find a stratagem that say uses Astarte shotguns, you're like, okay, what unit has Astarte shotguns? You won't know. You've got to literally go through every unit entry to find out. There's no easy search stuff. Like, and my problem with the Warhammer app, I think it's good as a reference. Like, when I'm gaming, I don't use my books at all. I just on the fly, Avenger Strike Fighter, I'll quickly type in the first few letters, found it, bosh, got the stats to remind myself, Hades drill, what's the toughness of that? It's 7. But when I'm trying to learn the unit, I would just quickly search and find the 2 or 3 or 4 units that I'm trying to find. In terms of stratagems and stuff, I tend to always remember them, so I'm not looking at other stuff. It just tends to be profiles that I'm trying to remember or look up. So for that, I find it really good. It's very fast, but for anything else, it's not very user friendly. And what concerns me, let's say, is there hasn't been any update to the app beyond content. They haven't made any improvements. They haven't updated the UI. They haven't updated, the fact that, like, if you want to search for a rule, you've got to go to the core book tab, and then you can search. If you want to find a terrain rule or an advanced rule, you've got to do that under I can't remember what it's called, the left-hand one, which has all the reference which has all the faction-specific rules. You've got to go there to search for those. But if you want to look up, like, all the guard rules, you can't just go faction guard. You've got to go, is it Astra Militarum Codex? Is it Forge World Imperium Compendium? Is it Psychic Awakening? You've got to search by publication, which isn't easy to do. So there's
and the army list creator is terrible. Like, that you can't do the nuances at all in it. Like, if like the amount of warlord traits that aren't present in the right places, the amount of relics that aren't present, options that just aren't. It just
throws up a bunch of errors and stuff because it's saying you've not done something because you can't, or it's not.
Even though you can, and it's an awful piece of software. Like, and the thing, and the reason why I'm happy saying that now is it's been 1.5 years since it came into existence, and now there's no excuses. Now it's just terrible. That, like, early doors, I was like, this is bad, but hopefully it'll get better. Nah, it's not going to get better. It's evident.
I mean, who knows? They might do like a 2.0. They might do a complete
we know
range refresh of it. It feels like they've probably spent their time doing an AOS version, which is exactly the same and still got the same ultimately flawed
AOS
UI.
Guys must be irritated because the Azura system they had before was better
and free, or 99p a month. It was for the paid version. It was dirt cheap.
And it was better.
But it feels like they're spending.
They had quite a slick UI.
It feels like this time, like they're either spending all their time just doing data entry for the new codexes, or they've just spent all their time developing the AOS version, which feels like a reskin of the 40k one. I'm sure it's more complicated than that,
Those
But
poor,
as you
those
said,
poor AOS players, they
but
deserve
as you
better.
said, we've had a year and a half and we haven't really had any like functional updates to the actual app,
It's
which is really what you want.
because it's another example of them doing everything on the cheap. There's no reason why they had to do it on the cheap, but they're doing it on the cheap, and that's what you're seeing. It's you know, if they brought in a project manager with half a brain and someone with industry experience and someone with technical capabilities concerning app development, they could probably outsource this thing to a really, really fantastic group of developers who could make it into something special. You know, Warpedia is infinitely better, and it is entirely free, put together by the efforts of a bunch of, you know, fans somewhere in the world. Like, it's just, you know, it's inexcusable that the freely available software is beyond better than what you sell to people.
Yeah.
In my opinion, Warhammer 40,000's app is atrocious, and I'm comfortable saying that at this point. But the thing is, I think they feel like they've gotten away with it because they've basically they've shifted the focus over the Warhammer Plus. Warhammer 40,000 app is now just part of it, so they don't feel so obliged to do it.
Sort of hidden the costs, I guess, because originally they made it free for the beta period, and then it was for.
No, it's never been free.
Well, there was a few rolling.
Been free. You got a free month if you gave them a tenner and or a $5 and promised.
Yeah, and then I think it sort of went down super cheap. Then it went up to like
£2.
Well, then it went back up in price, and then just before they rolled it into Warhammer Plus, they made it $1.99 or whatever it was. So they did make it cheap again.
Yeah.
But now, as you say, they've shifted that cost into Warhammer Plus to give that value for money.
Yeah, it's awful. So hopefully 2022 they'll fix that, but we'll talk about that later. Right, okay, there you go. General vibes on 40k. I'm going to start, Phil. I'm going to be selfish and start. You can close it out. So this was an interesting year. 2020 was obviously incredibly unique, as we all came to terms with all the various things we needed to come to terms with. And one of the interesting things that happened with 40k is we got probably the most competitively orientated version of the game ever created. Not that the game was actually balanced or actually truly kind of competitive in the way people wanted it to be necessarily, or feel like it could be, but they, you know, tailored everything towards the competitive player base. As I said during the initial impressions of 9th edition, the inmates have taken over the asylum, and I stand by that. I think this is the most competitive-orientated version of 40k they've ever created, and I think that is to the overall detriment of the game. But you know, I'm a hardcore enough fan that I persevere with it, and I make my own fun by playing versions that kind of go off the beaten path of you know, GT mission pack play, strict terrain placement, so on and so forth. But what was unique about 2021 is it's essentially the culmination of those ideologies coming into, you know, physical form, manifesting themselves in reality, because so much of what we did during the course of 2020 was come to terms with the new rules, theory craft, and ultimately play a sterilized, heavily modified adaptation of the game via Tabletop Simulator. Everyone who was playing 40k during the course of the early parts of 2021, for the majority of instances, were consuming competitive content and replicating competitive content via a simulation of the game. In a lot of instances, I heard people went so far as to math hammer outcomes, so they didn't even roll dice within Tabletop Simulator. They just basically ran a maths hammer equation and said, this unit kills this unit because math hammer says so, which again is a really interesting way of kind of eliminating some of the randomness, some of the fun, some of the really actually quite expressive elements of the game. And I think that's basically come to the forefront in terms of what we've seen go out into the wild now. So once obviously the doors open up, we had huge levels of support for the competitive scene, events selling out left, right, and center, people falling over themselves to get out there and play 40k. It's been, you know, a year now, and we're all chomping at the bit, and we're all excited to test our ability as generals, and everyone's optimized based on all the latest stuff that the various competitive people have told them is the best. And, you know, I think the result of that is that, you know, I think a lot of people came out of the you know, the lockdowns with a very interesting idea of what 40k had become. And I think that ideology has kind of started to dissipate throughout the course of 2021. And I think people are starting to kind of come to the terms with the fact that maybe competitive play isn't quite the be all and end all. But I think one of the things that's really interesting is that there is becoming a kind of divisional mindset in terms of those that are kind of hardwired competitive players and those that are probably trying to be more narratively orientated. And I think there is this kind of weird disconnect between the two, because it's evident that competitive content, competitive output draws an audience far easier and far more consistently than stuff that's geared towards the more kind of casual, maybe, narrative player bases. But bizarrely, the biggest kind of content creators in the community are those that probably talk more generally about the games. Your they're certainly not that, more tabletop tactics, and people like Valric and Winters, who have a more kind of fun hobby ideology, seem to definitely achieve greater results than those that are very kind of competitive focused. But then also certain individuals in that space have been around for longer. My point is that the year's been interesting because everything has been kind of filtered through competitive ideologies, and everyone communicates about 40k within the various online forums that are available to us. And people have become so obsessed within those spaces about what is competitive. I think they've lost sight of a lot of the kind of more creative, more fun aspects of the game. And I think the discourse around 40k has become really stilted. I think people basically are afraid to suggest that they want to collect an army of all tanks because it's fun. Because if they go on to one of the various forums, that communicate around 40k, people will belittle them and suggest that what they're doing is wrong. And I think this is the problem with the way that the hobby has developed in the kind of ecosystem that is online during the pandemic. I think a very specific sector of the audience has been able to kind of become more audible, and I think they have essentially created this misrepresentation of the hobby as a whole. And I think Games Workshop also, unfortunately, are heavily pandering to that audience at the moment. And I think it is also having a negative effect, rather, on the overall kind of perception of the game. I think people, for the most part, are relatively unimpressed with the way that the releases are going. And I think people just want to have fun with their toy soldiers rather than being obsessed about being the best, 40k player. Although obviously innately you want to be competitive, innately you want that aspect of it. But I think it's a really weird time. Like, I think 40k has had a weird year. I am a hardcore fan and I've loved it for years. And, I can turn on the kind of competitive ideologies if I need to, but I've spent the majority of the year playing armies that are not objectively competitive. And I've been going to events, purposely bringing armies that I know I'm not going to win with, but I'm just trying to have fun with. But it's hard. It's hard to be enthusiastic about that style of gameplay, because unfortunately, when you go to events now, from the bottom to the top, it's filled with killers. And I think that's the problem. It's like, it's more difficult than ever to have fun playing this game within those kind of settings. And it's very try hard at all times. But I don't know. I can hang fine enough in those environments, but I think it's just interesting to see what it's doing to the general discourse. But what has been reassuring for me is I've seen a lot of players now actually starting, or rather a lot of hobbyists starting to become more vocal on their opinions on this and starting to try and kind of push back against that. But it is a few very kind of key people doing that at the moment, as opposed to the kind of general sentiment. So I don't want to seem overly negative about it. I'm just saying that I think the problem is that Games Workshop have tried really hard over the years to create a game that accommodates everybody. And it feels like 40k of old did a better job of being a system that accommodated multiple ways of playing. Whereas now it just feels like it's very competitive focused. And I think that is a negative. And I think the stratagem system is completely busted and needs completely overhauling. So hopefully we'll start to see some changes to that, because it's horribly bloated. But there you go. Look, there's a lot of diatribe about my general vibes on 2021. It's an interesting year. I think it's basically, it's the internet made manifest. It's everything that people have been talking about brought to life this year. But I think people are now starting to settle, and I'm hopeful that in 2022 we'll have more varied ways of engaging with the hobby. What do you think, Phil?
I like taking slipped in that little jab at stratagems at the end. Not to say it's not undeserved. I think I've noticed even more competitive talking head folks, YouTube pundits and the like, talk about stratagems, saying there's just too many in general, that they would almost like a deck building element to stratagems to minimize the number that you take and the number that you know can be gotcha'd by your opponent. Because if up front you go, here's my 5 or 8 stratagems that I'm taking in my army, you can play a game knowing full well exactly what they can all do and not have a sudden curveball because, you know, the latest Warzone books come out and unlocked, you know, another 15 stratagems that your army can use that your opponent isn't aware of yet because it's, you know, came out a few weeks ago, or, you know, could have come out a few months ago, but, you know, they've just never seen them or bought the book themselves and stuff like that. It is, you're right, it's also been the most competitively minded year of 40k, it feels like, but also the most disappointing year of competitive 40k. Like I can't say I've ever liked it, to be honest. When we had 8th edition and we had the, you know, GT like missions, even like the chapter approved stuff, like the chapter approved Eternal War missions, like I was always a bit like, okay, right, I'll do them. Weirdly, these are the types of missions I prefer now more in hindsight, in comparison to the current form of GT missions. But I was much more like, yeah, Maelstrom's really cool. That's really fun and interesting. I would pick that over Eternal War. Now I would pick Eternal War over the GT missions. But this year we had the GT chapter approved book that was effectively a reprint of the previous years with a couple of changes in it. And now they've pretty much announced that there's going to be a new one coming out at the start of next year. So if you did buy that book that didn't have a spiral bind in it, like we did, because we did a podcast, that chapter approved lasted like 6 months, if that. So that was a complete waste of time and money for everyone involved. I don't know why Games Workshop even bothered with that. So that, again, was another one of those like disappointing moments where you're like, why have you done this? It could have just been a PDF FAQ update, you know, a freebie, throw one in there to keep the fans happy if it was really only going to be valid for 6 months, which is what the implication is from what Games Workshop have said. Yeah, you're right. Overall, community seems to be very competitive focused, especially in terms of like YouTubers, people that get around, that sort of thing. But also Games Workshop's focus, like Warhammer community tends to do, you know, does Meta Watch, which is just all about tournaments. They don't do a similar thing for Crusade or open play. When was the last time you saw anything to do with open play, like that deck building mission structure on Warhammer community? They don't ever push that as a concept or way of playing. If you're a new player, you probably don't even know that exists, basically.
I'd say even if you were a long-time established player, I think it's just not on everyone's radar.
But they are the best ways of playing 40k. Like this year, I played some Open War, I played some Crusade. Love them both. Love them way more than competitive play. But the focus of Games Workshop is competitive. Like it's not even like Warhammer community isn't very hobby focused either. Come to think of it, like they do From the Mind of Mengel, who's got his own blog and he does articles, like painting articles. They occasionally do community armies and bring people on and photograph their armies and showcase them. Really few and far between, it feels like. It's mostly previewing new minis, previewing new rules, alternate those two elements. Plus webcomics and stuff, which is cool.
I mean, a lot of that's going to depend on how they are judged on their performance. If it is that obviously they're trying to drive clicks, then I'm assuming that they get a lot more clicks for their competitive rules and or miniature content.
Yeah, I mean, I've liked it when I've seen stuff for Necromunda, because that they do have like a series that's all about like how to be an arbitrator. Like the people that run the Necromunda campaigns and like give you advice on how to run them and stuff. which I think is cool. Yeah, I'd like to see a bit more of a shift in focus onto more narrative and crusade, or just general hobby elements. Like, you know, that I think some of it they hold back for White Dwarf for the times that they do it, but it would be cool to see Warhammer community show off more of those aspects of the hobby. And even when they're like previewing rules, it's always like, oh my god, this is so good, it's going to totally wipe out your opponent, like you should be totally hyped that, you know, Tau are going to be mental good, or Drakari are going to be, here's some really cool combos that you can do that are kind of broken, but here we are teaching you them as part of our Warhammer community article, so we can get you all pumped up for whatever codex is coming out. It feels like they never used to do that, but they really sort of lean into it now, more so than ever before.
Yeah, it's weird though as well, right? Because part of me obviously is aware of the fact that I've become closer to the hobby through this podcast than. I mean, this is the thing. I've always been a really, you know, hardcore user of like 40k and Games Workshop and all the rest of it. I've been super engaged with this thing forever. But the thing is I think through doing the podcast, maybe we've gained a little bit more kind of exposure to the event scene, or, you know, because it used to be that you and I would just do a few Warhammer World events a year and the odd indie. But I think definitely throughout the course of, say, 2019, I started doing more indie events as I was trying out to, you know, be more of a kind of competitive player. And certainly this year has been ridiculous. Like, I'm heavily restricting myself in 2022 to how many kind of competitive events I want to sort of focus on. But the point is that I think, you know, obviously we have a unique vantage point because we have started going to a lot more events and things because, you know, they're fun weekends away and so on and so forth. But irrespective, I think even if you discount that, there's still that kind of prevailing sentiment towards the competitive play and the way that the hobby is kind of leaning more into that direction, with the way that they write rules, with the way that they promote that style of play, and the way that, you know, the main kind of representatives of the hobby now are kind of communicating. You know, again, if you go back 7 years to 2014, you go back to the 2014 version of 40k, and we knew that back in 2014, around 6th edition, that there were all these busted, horrible armies that people could run. And you heard tale on Bell of Lost Souls or the Warseer forums that, you know, this army was crazy and all the rest of it. But it wasn't really the mainstream at that time. It was kind of like a periphery part of the hobby. And you got the odd report back from what was happening at the European team tournaments or whatever. And you might listen to what were they called? Allies of Convenience podcast back in the day. And they talked a lot about competitive 40k. And it was interesting hearing about like those competitive builds because it was so alien to what you were used to experiencing from a more generic 40k perspective. And again, this could just be me specifically, but that was the case. And then, you know, you think about the kind of the leaders of the community back then, the kind of main channels, the outlets. Back then, it was people like Striking Scorpion, Templars Crusade, if you remember that guy back in the day who used to do loads of like hobby content.
Yeah, I totally remember him because he used to do a Krieg army. It's fantastic.
Yeah, exactly.
Love him.
But, you know, yeah. I mean, it's an absolute crying shame that Templars Crusade doesn't do content for 40k anymore. I think he's... Again, Tabletop Tactics were coming into existence at that point back in sort of 2014. But, you know, the majority of what those guys did was fun, interesting, narratively sort of interesting games. Striking Scorpion always had this weird kind of turn up, come along and play me, or I win every game miraculously type of vibe to his output. But again, the game looked gorgeous. There was a real celebration of the hobby element of it. You know, when you saw those tables people used to play on, it was just gorgeous. And that's the thing. It's like, you know, now everything sort of feels like it's been sort of diluted down into this really dull version of things. It's like every time I go online and I look at someone creating content around 40k, it's the same tedious terrain layout, albeit with slightly different bits of terrain, but broadly, you know, performing the same function. And, you know, it's just and it's lots of maths and lots of like ridiculous stuff. It's like it's just difficult to instill narrative or enthusiastically interesting moments
or
within
fun.
Yeah, exactly. It's just the thing. And that's the thing about open war. Open war can be competitive. As demonstrated at the rapid fire wargaming event. But the thing is that it's just not, I don't know, you just don't get the big numbers like you do when you're playing the GT mission. So I get it, right? But like, yeah, but that's my vibe for 2021 is I think, unfortunately, it was inevitable that we were going to find ourselves in a situation where we were more at the mercy of the competitive community because they've become the dominant voice online. And we have all been forced into those online spaces as a means of communicating with each other during the time of 2020 and early 2021. And, you know, these gaming clubs and these establishments that we might have been part of in 2019, early 2020 have, you know, not really been a priority. And I think, you know, one of the things that I'm looking forward to in 2022, again, spoilers for the next bit of this, but, you know, I'm looking forward to hopefully getting back into a regular gaming club scene and playing regular normal games and, you know, experimenting with different armies and having fun with it. You know, I'm really excited about the doubles. I'm really excited about a lot of things, but we're going to talk about that in a moment. But for the case of 2021, I just sort of felt like, I think it was a lot of us getting a lot of pent up 40k out of our system. And I think we've had that now. And I think hopefully things will settle down in 2022 and a bit of normality will resume in terms of how people approach this and, you know, engage with the hobby, because that's what I want to see. And don't get me wrong though, if competitive 40k is your jam, I'm well happy for you. If you love this for what it is, good on you. And it's great. Like, it's amazing. But I'm just basically voicing the fact that I'm not one of you. But I respect the fact that you are and that you love it. And I'm grateful that you do, because, you know, if 40k should be enjoyed by everyone, but that's the point, is it should be enjoyed by everyone.
Yeah, I mean, here's a weird thing. Like, there is so many good and interesting ways to play 40k that they've put out this year. They've done 3 Crusade packs. Each one has, like, dare I say, like 50 missions in, all unique. One of them is specifically all about like multiplayer games, which we talked about on previous episode. They've done 4 Warzone books. Not all of them, but a lot of them have like legendary missions and kind of Crusade or Crusade/campaign structures to them. There's tons of stuff in White Dwarf. In fact, the best missions and rules that I've seen are all the Flashpoint stuff in White Dwarf. I feel like it's almost like a tragedy that is in White Dwarf and no one's seeing it, and that they're not in the Warzone books, because to me that feels like such valuable, interesting content. I'm like, why is it not in the book that I'm paying for? Why is it in White Dwarf? That yes, I am paying for.
You're paying for,
but it's a subscription, or at least for me, it's a subscription. Yeah, I just find it weird that it's not in the books, because again, it's a bit like that kind of DLC concept of the Warzone books themselves. It's like, should this not be in the Codex? And I'm like, you're making me get the White Dwarf, but this should really be in the Warzone book, even if it makes it a bit fatter. But they're trying to make White Dwarf its own interesting thing, which is an interesting topic in and of itself. But it feels like there's no focus to any of these things. And I've had plenty of chats with people online. It feels like people know it's there. People are playing it. I know plenty of people playing Crusade. It's all come out the woodwork, but there just doesn't seem to be the online presence of it. I think this morning I was trying to search on Facebook, a Facebook group for Crusade gaming. Could I find one? No. There are at least 2 massive competitive 40k groups. I'm in one of them. I can't remember how big it is. The other one had like 4,000 people in. I was like, there's another one. I didn't realize there was 2. I didn't bother joining that one. I was trying to find this Crusade group. Couldn't find a single one. And I was like, what? Why isn't there one? Is it maybe I should search for like narrative or something else? I don't know. If anyone knows, let me know, because I'm really keen to join one and just see how people are playing it. And that's the thing that you don't get, because no one's talking about it. No one's talking about how they play Crusade, what their overall campaign structure is, or if someone's narrating it or adminning it. it's all that sort of stuff. If you're getting into it for the first time, you probably want a bit of guidance on in terms of how you should go about it. So, yeah, I mean, that's an interesting one, that there is that kind of division and there's this focus on competitive play. I mean, I would love for us to do a little roundup about our hobbying, but maybe we'll save that for the outro when we talk about the stuff we've done personally in our stop shaking your head, Dan, stop shaking your head.
No, I was my shaking my head was to be like, no, mate, let's do it now, is where I'm at with
No,
it.
let's save it for the outro. Our 20...
You want to save it for the outro?
21 hobby retrospective. Yeah.
Is the outro. Okay, fine. Well, if that's going to be the outro, then that's pretty much going to conclude our thoughts on 2021. I think we covered the broad breadth of topics. It's been a really interesting year.
Would you give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down?
I'd give it neither. I'd say for me, it's absolutely, it's a filler year is the way I look at it. I think 2021, 9th edition in general, this whole situation that they find themselves in with it, is I just don't think they know what they're doing with it, and I don't think the decisions they're making around their kind of core design principles are especially good. But I don't think that it's especially bad either. I just think it's just perpetuating what they've created, and this is the thing. I'm disappointed, I suppose. I mean, if I was leaning towards a summary, I suppose I would be negative, which is a shame because I don't like being negative. But I remember how optimistic and excited I was when I read that new Marine Dex. When that new Marine Dex dropped in 2020, I was like, this is great. Because what this demonstrates to me is that the core principles of 9th edition books is to create balance. Balance is at the heart of everything. Because early doors of that Marine book, I'm reading it going, nothing in this makes me feel like it's broken. Everything is well considered. But the reason, obviously, why that was the case is because they had the 2019 Space Marine book to essentially bounce everything off. They could go, right, okay, well, we really mucked up with Centurions. Nerf them. The double shooting on these aggressors is a bit dumb. Knock that down. Giving these guys the core keyword is dumb. Get rid of that. Like, they were able to take the learnings of the Space Marine 2019 book and apply them in 2020, which is why I think that's the case. But I think the problem is I don't think the same level of due diligence has obviously been done. And I think, again, we've ended up in a situation where we've ended up with these ridiculously powerful armies that are insanely good versus their competition. And then conversely, we've ended up in a situation where, they've just consistently released so many rules in so many different ways that are mostly catering towards that competitive player base that it's just been, I imagine if you go back and listen to all of the podcasts that we produced, all 52 of them that we've put out in the course of 51, not including this one, that we put out in the course of 2021. I think there's a lot of times where I'm relatively negative about stuff. And also as well, I'd like to say that the way these codexes are structured, I find them really hard to get into. Like I am the least interested in reading codexes right now because of how they are written. Like I just think they're just too much. I just find them an exercise in frustration to sort of get my head around the way the rules are.
There's definitely a bit back and forth between the layout of where certain army rules sit. Then you get like upgrades, your chapter masters, you get your relics and war gear and stratagems. Then you get crusade. Then you get another bunch of army specific abilities, but these ones just seem like they're more tied to data sheets as opposed to the other ones which are like army wide benefits, so they're not in the same place. That one's a little bit on the confusing side for sure.
I would give this year 5 out of 10. That's it's smack bang in the middle. It's not
for what should be year 2 of an edition, which should be a really exciting year. Lots of codexes coming out. Everyone's getting their new rules. It should be a pretty positive stage because everything's new and interesting. The metas should be settling per se to an extent. Like people are getting used to the game. People are starting to actually get their head around the rules. okay, good, this is how we actually play it. We're not making mistakes like from when we first learned the new game. So it should be really positive. No one should be fatigued. No one should be bored of playing the same stuff. Although weirdly, people aren't in the competitive scene. I'm just going to make a little dig. They've been literally playing the same. Is it 6 missions or 10 missions from the GT mission pack? I can't remember. It's more,
2,000 points. Yeah, it's a D33 essentially.
Yeah, so they've been playing the same missions for basically the 2 years, like all of this year, all of last year, exact same missions. But there's always other cool missions in Crusade, or even in the cool rulebook under Crusade. All this cool stuff, the old Eternal War stuff. But anyway, like this is the first year where I've really noticed people already go, just burn it all down, like bring on 10th edition, like so bored of 9th edition, and these are like prominent like YouTubers that not us obviously, prominent people, like people that enjoy normally would enjoy competitive play. It's weird to see those people that are the advocates of effectively the system they've created around competitive play actually be frustrated with it the most and go, no, I need a reset and I want 10th edition already. Because normally you would expect that towards the end of an edition, once Psychic Awakening got going, by the end where we were like, oh, there's a lot of rules below, or we could do with a bit of a tidy up with the rules and stuff. And, for 8th edition, we had a ton of like beta updates, tweaking the rules over time. So it really needed it. This time, we don't really have that. It's almost like the absence of FAQs and updates this time, although they have obviously started to address that with the balanced status sheets, for example. But yeah, it's weird that so early on people are already saying they don't want the edition.
Yeah, strange, isn't it? But again, and I think that that questionnaire that Games Workshop put out is an interesting one, because I think that was an interesting thing to see. But again, my belief is that a bunch of people who love the competitive stuff went on there and said how much they love it, because that's the thing, they love it, right? Like this competitive community love it, and that's great. It's great, and maybe that's the thing, Phil. Maybe 40k isn't for us anymore. Maybe over time, people like you and me, who are the old salty vets who have been playing this thing for editions and editions, maybe it's just not for us anymore. Maybe Games Workshop want to focus on the hip young consumers who love this 40k competitive ideology. And if that is the case, fine. Maybe inevitably, Phil, we're just getting to that point where we should just go off and play
exactly
Onyx, like the old men that
we're getting to that age, so it's probably meant to be.
But I don't think that's true, though. I think this is the thing. I'm so still invested, and that's the thing as well, right? Because I hate these types of conversations, because I hate the idea of someone listening to this and thinking, well, these guys are just a bunch of Games Workshop haters. They hate it. It's like, I seriously don't hate it, because I put out a podcast every week talking for hours about this topic. I'm so passionate about it. It's unbelievable. It's like, I've invested so much money in collecting and being engaged with this hobby. I love it. And that's the thing, I suppose, is that maybe I love it too much. Maybe that's the problem.
I think that's fair enough. And I think the more passionate you are, the more it is to please you, I think. So I think overall, even the most diehard 40k fan will say, yeah, there's been some issues this year that could be better, could have been done better in the first place. Some of it is circumstance, in terms of like release schedule and shipping and stuff, not being able to produce stock, for example. So a lot of stuff you can forgive. Some stuff you're like, nah, this really needs to be worked on and improved. But I think most people would look back, go an all right year in terms of like the miniatures. 40k as a rule set, a bit of an odd one, just very unbalanced, I think, from at least the competitive side of things.
But maybe that's the thing, though, isn't it? Because they've illustrated and demonstrated that they are willing to listen and to try and fix things. So maybe 22 is going to be exciting. Maybe it's going to be the
well, it really
of
could
it.
Be.
Maybe. And that's what I want more than anything. I want to have this conversation in 2022 and praise what they've done. I'm rooting for them. You know, I'm very excited about what 2022 could hold, because I do think as I say, we've exercised the demons. We've allowed the impact of 2020 to have its kind of influence on the way people communicate and engage with the game. But I think there has been some, you know, equilibrium established between the competitive and the broader kind of more hobby community. And I think we're in an exciting point where I do think maybe now, as people start going back into stores and playing in local clubs and doing things more regularly with their friends rather than focusing on competitive play, that I think things will start to dissipate and eventually we're going to get good. And I'm hopeful that this new mission structure they're going to release will give us something to get excited about again. I'm hopeful. I remain hopeful. I toiled through the events of 6th and 7th edition. I stuck with GW during those times. I continued to invest in miniatures and rules, and I'm not someone who's going to be abandoning the cause anytime soon. But at the same time, it's just I think it's important that people like you and I speak truthfully about where we're at with it at the moment and what we've observed and what we've come to understand as the current state of things. So if that has been, shocking to you as a listener, or you're frustrated by our perspective on these things, it is what it is. But at the same time, understand that all we want is the best for it. We want this community to thrive and for us all to be able to enjoy the hobby in all the different ways that we enjoy it. And I think that's the thing. I think I want to see those improvements. Roll on 10th edition. Phil was smiling to that video. I was expecting him to say something.
I'm just as a summary. I think the all the negatives have mostly been focused on competitive play. If you're not into that, if you're playing Open War and Crusade, it's been a good year. Been a lot of cool stuff. Well, Open War has stayed the same. It's just a deck of cards. You're still having fun. There's people like Rapid Fire Wargaming putting on events using the Open War deck system. Brilliant. I did my mission cogitator, random mission generator page on my website that people seem to like. Really cool ways of playing the game. Tons of ways of playing Crusade. Like all the Warzone books, I think, is a fantastic way of releasing Crusade content, because you only really need to pick it up if it's relevant to your faction. If not, you can kind of ignore it. It doesn't really matter. So I think if you're not taking the game so seriously, you're probably having a whale of a time. But you will still probably be aware of the competitive scene, aware of the boogeyman under your bed with his orc rucker trucks or his no, I know, not anymore, mate. But
not anymore.
The Hive Guards, or
with his Tyranid
will be
Guard,
next. Like it feels like that spoils it for everyone else, because everyone focuses on that as such a negative. It's a handful of people running those lists in the world. You probably, unless you're going to tournaments, you're never going to play them unless your mate is one of those people that's just like, I've just bought all the Hive Guard at my local shop. Just wait till I've got some primer on and we're having a fun game, as he manically laughs to himself, running down the street full of boxes of Hive Guard. I mean, I mean, those people do exist, but again, few and far between. You can just choose not to play them. I think most people are probably really enjoying themselves playing 40k, and I think there has been, because I just want to say this so we're not ending on a downer. Has been a lot of positives this year. Just not really the competitive scene. So just put your little blinkers on, focus on the fun bits that you're enjoying, and just do that.
I mean, that is a good way of summarizing as well, mate, in terms of the things that have been good, right? And there have been some good stuff. I genuinely think that there has been some good elements to it. I think, some of the releases have been really strong. I think some of the miniatures have been gorgeous. I think the community is really doing some great things. And I think it's beautiful that, we're coming out of these lockdowns and getting together and playing games and helping to support each other. I think, the community has demonstrated on so many occasions that it's a great thing to be a part of. And, 40K is a fantastic hobby to be involved with. And, there's a reason why I love doing all this stuff. It's I think it's been a 5 out of 10 year, but I think even then it's still, 5 out of 10 is still fine. It's been all right. It's just, I think that's the problem. I think we need to see what I just at that point where I just want to get into 2022 and see what that has in store. I just want my Craftworld release.
It's not far off. And I guess we can talk about that next.
Indeed we can, mate. But there you go. That has to have the record, Phil, for the longest segment that we have sat and recorded in one sitting. Spoilers, everyone. Normally we actually break it up, but we've actually managed to go 2.5 hours without any breaks.
Madness.
Which might be, I know, the rambling mess of it all. But I suppose this is indicative of the fact that we're not going to be putting out an episode for a few weeks after this comes out. So in a way, we're kind of giving you a lot to digest, I guess, over the next little while. But thank you for listening to our ramblings on the topic of 2021. Again, love to hear your own thoughts on how it all went. So please reach out to us on our social media and communicate with us about your own impressions of 2021. I'm really excited to hear how other people found it and what highlights they have within it. And again, I think one of the things that has been a highlight is definitely some of the hobby aspects of it, which we're going to talk about in the outro. But before we're going to talk about that, we've got to talk about what 2022 has in store as we imagine. And we're going to do that after this transitional noise. All right, guys, despite saying that we were going to talk about 2022, that is now the end of the podcast because I'm not feeling tip-top and I just ain't got it in me. But, that segment was pretty long anyway, the whole 2021 retrospective. So I'm going to try and maintain the, cognitive ability to communicate while we go through this outro. And hopefully I'll be able to maintain a certain level of lucidity throughout. But I'm definitely foggy. It's that intro was hard to do, and it probably came across. But there we are. Some potentially controversial opinions in that 2021 recap, Phil. I mean, you got any thoughts or feelings on that? Anything that you want to expand upon or talk about?
Yeah. So I think, since then, basically, so today, since we recorded that segment, I'd watched the last of the Hammer and Bolter. I don't know if it's the last of this year's Hammer and Bolter episodes, which is all about Admech, and that was phenomenal. Like, I really loved it. In fact, Hammer and Bolter is like, if Warhammer Plus was just Hammer and Bolter and they could churn that out more, I would be pretty happy. Because I do like the Hammer and Bolter stuff the most, I would say.
That's pretty cool. I mean, yeah, that sounds like a pretty solid recommendation. I mean, that's the thing. It's not to say that Warhammer Plus doesn't have some good content within it. It's just the cadence of its release alongside the way that it was kind of promoted, and with the way that it's kind of ended up being what it is. And I think that's it, really. It's like, it's not that I don't appreciate or enjoy what is on there. It's just that it's been difficult to remain engaged by it, though. That's the thing. I haven't watched, as I said already, I hadn't watched any of the content on there for ages. I mean, I might sit down now and watch it all thanks to your recommendations and see how we get on with it.
It's easy to it's easy to avoid it because you've got to go sort of out of your way to it. It's not like it's on YouTube and you're subscribed to it. You don't get email notifications telling you new stuff's on it. It's hard to even remember where it lives because there's mywarhammer.com, There's warhammerplus.com, and it's in neither of those places. It's actually warhammertv.com. So it's like, yeah, it's a weird way that they've sort of structured it. You know, it's not like it's a Netflix series and it's going to sit somewhere that you probably check out every day. It's you've got to go out of your way to do it. The other thing that I finished today was Warzone Caradon Book 2. So I finally finished that off this week because I was really desperate to actually, for this review, say whether it had a satisfactory ending or if it was the cliched cop-out that they often get accused of doing in terms of Abaddon's just left Vigilus and he left, but it was a stalemate victory. No one really wins, no one really loses. Tends to be the perceived feelings that how these campaign books tend to play out. So I was wondering whether that really would be the case or not.
Yeah. So how did it turn out?
So spoilers. Interestingly, it's Typhus wins by basically getting into Metallica, into like the data core to an extent, I guess, like where the what's he called? It's Kleng, which is the fabricator general of Metallica, manages to get into his control room and insert what's called the worm, or WURM, which is effectively a plague virus into Metallica, which corrupts the planet. And he also corrupts Kleng as well, the fabricator general. So he turns into this bloated monster, and basically Typhus then leaves as a sort of a victorious withdrawal rather than running away, although he's obviously severely his forces are severely depleted as well. And then what happens, they basically say that everything's been corrupted and have to spend days, if not weeks, basically purging everything, trying to clean the data code of the Forge World. And once they think it's all done, it keeps coming back and again. And they actually, and even though the corrupted fabricator general is still alive, they actually kill him basically because they can't unpurge him basically without just, I guess, burning him. So they do kill him. So basically, it's sort of like it's spun as a victory for the Imperium because Chaos eventually leave the system, but the system is devastated to the point where their actual output as a factory, as a Forge World, is so depleted they're not really doing anything or contributing to any wider war efforts. The other interesting thing that happens is the household, like the night raid, was it the night household ravens? Which was an army of renowned.
Yeah. Well, it was actually a Codex supplement.
Yeah, a Codex supplement. Yeah, so their homeworld of Colossi disappears. Basically, Be'lakor gets summoned, I think, on that planet, and he actually takes it with him somewhere. It just literally completely disappears. So now they are they deliberately say they're not a free blade because he thinks that would be too devastating to the remaining knights. But basically, they're effectively a fleet-based army now, and they're going around fighting where they need to fight, but ultimately in search of their homeworld, or to find out what's happened to it, which I thought was interesting. So it was like it was an interesting way of doing it, and it was a little bit like Vigilus. It was Chaos wins, but also leaves. So, if you were to play House Raven, if you were to play Metallica as your army, you still can. But like your homeworld's, been injured and it might not ever recover. So they're basically the Forge World is on the hunt for a cure to cure the planet, basically, that's been corrupted by this code, and they don't know. Otherwise, it is slowly dying, basically. So I thought it was quite a good way of making it that Chaos can win, without it completely going, well, Chaos has completely won and taken over the sector in a very sort of traditional war type setting. Because if you just said to them, yeah, Metallica's been destroyed and there's none of them left, people would be probably quite upset. But at the same time, they also did it with Cadia and they got away with it. And Cadians still exist within the lore. Like they've even got their own supplement and stuff quite recently. So, yeah, I thought it was quite a good way that they did it. You could argue it's a bit of a cop out because it's a bit of a people win, but people don't win. Everyone, well, not everyone, not the Fabricator General. Most people survived unscathed. But I like that there felt like there was actual consequences from it, which I thought was good.
Decent, yeah. No, sounds interesting for sure. I think that has definitely been their consistent issue with a lot of things, and I suppose that's one of the interesting things with like House Raven or Forge World Metallica is that maybe they feel like with those specific elements that they're able to be more experimental with the outcomes and things that occur to it rather than the named characters and their incredibly enduring plot armor.
Yes, yeah. I mean, they're a small enough sort of faction that you could probably get rid of them, and no one would really complain too much because not many people actually play them. Like, I don't think many people paint up their admech to be anything other than Mars. I'm sure some people do, but yeah, I can't say I've seen many that would be so wedded to like, oh, this one's painted House Metallica because that's how I play them, as opposed to just picking and choosing their favorite one, which would most likely be the case.
But yeah, no, it's interesting, man. I mean, it sounds like a cool narrative.
Yeah, I'm keen to get into the Octarius one now and see how that one goes with the Tyranids and the Orcs.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what they continue to do with the development of the story. It's definitely one of those things where they are obviously trying to create lots of interesting narratives within the broader 40k universe, which is cool. So yeah, no, I guess we'll wait and see what happens with them Orcs and them Tyranids as they start to release more of these potentially controversial books. Will that in any way inform your hobby decisions, or has that in any way informed your hobby output in the span of 2021? I mean, it's been a fairly productive year for you, right? I mean, you've done a lot of different things. I feel like you've had a lot going on.
So I'm trying to think. The beginning of the year, I was finishing off stuff I started at the end of last year, which was my More Time Warband. So I was working on a few bits for that. I'd created my weird Rat King monstrosity as well, along with my hand sculpted pig that I'd done. So those were two things. Then I basically cracked on with my Minotaurs and my 30 intercessors, although it was actually 29 intercessors because I'd already done a test mini plus a lieutenant. So I'd managed to paint all of those up, and that took basically the majority of the year. That was a good, I'm going to say 2-3 months at least. I had a break in between as well. Because I was just getting so fed up painting it. I was like, I need a break to do something else. So that's when I did my Thunder Warriors project, which I'm still only like a touch of the way through. I've barely started. I've done I think I've done about 9 models, all in various stages of completion. I think one's actually finished. Is my like test mini in terms of how I went about converting it from Stormcast Eternals. I've got lots of cool ideas for that, and I really want that to be an army that I can grow next year, because I've worked out I need to do between 20 and 30 models for a full 2,000 point army.
Yes,
which is kind of mad, but
that's assuming that the new Custodies book doesn't alter that in some way.
Oh, true, in terms of points and stuff, yeah. But I think,
Yeah.
because I was painting up the 30 intercessors for my Minotaurs and going, oh, geez, this is like a lot of work. And then I sort of went down this Thunder Warrior rabbit hole. But basically, I discovered if I paint up 30 of them, I've got a full army that's playable.
Yeah.
It's like, and if I'm putting the same amount of time and effort into painting them, it's like, oh, this is doable. Like, this is cool. Like, and I could do it in smaller batches. Basically, I think one lesson I learned from that is 30 models is far too many to paint up as a batch. I think I need to do squads of 10 max. I think the most I've ever done is 50, which was from a Krieg, and that was also a similar like hair pulling out experience. But yeah, I think with the Thunder Warriors, I might just do a couple at a time, sort of thing, rather than try and batch paint them all at once.
Yeah, makes sense, mate. Makes sense.
Yeah, and then what else have I done? I did a little test mini of a Black Templars guy. I did one mini of that I gave away to someone as a gift. I rebased some of my Krieg artillery and put bases on them and repainted them and updated the painting, because a lot of them were my what I would call tabletop standard, where basically I haven't done any weathering effects or weathering powders on them. So I was upping them to that standard for when I took them to No Retreat. Yeah, took them to No Retreat. Yeah. That was why I did them. I also painted up it was a Forge World exclusive mini. It was like a Princeps guy who's only got one arm and he's holding a little board. And I painted him up as, for No Retreat, I ran him as my officer of the fleet, and then for the RFW event, I ran him as my Tempestor Scion Prime, which actually I think works out better because he's actually got the same carapace armor on the front as my Grenadiers, who I count as my Scions. So I think he's now automatically become my new Tempestor Prime model, because actually he looks really cool and fits in with them better than the model I was using beforehand. And then that brings up to my last thing that I'm currently working on, which is my 2 Contemptors, which I was meant to be painting up for the Rapid Fire Wargaming event, but got waylaid somewhat. So
yeah,
I've not actually. Yeah, they've been sat on my desk for the best part of a month and a half, if not more, being unpainted. So I need to actually get back to that, which I will be doing during the Christmas break at some point, I think.
That's good, mate. It's good list of accomplishments there.
Yeah, I did my Ho Ho Hobby Vices project, so I painted up that box, which is the main thing from those. Oh, I got my Ho Ho Hobby Vices box as well, which was...
what did you receive?
It came from Switzerland, so I did pay some customs import duty, but the guy actually paid it for me. He was like, "Oh, I can't have you paying a customs fee," so he was really kind and paid it for me. A guy called Benoit. I got some Stormcast Vigilators, I think they're called, for my Thunder Warriors project.
Yep.
A Space Marine Apothecary model. Some very nice and tasty Swiss chocolate.
Oh, okay.
Swiss chocolate. And I also got a bits box, which not a bits box, a bits bag of bits, which is very cool. Loads of really cool little bits like Adeptus Mechanicus Gribblies in there and guns and stuff. So I'm looking forward to using those, because to me that was almost like the best bit, because I was like, cool, loads of cool, really random bits that are quite hard to get hold of. It's like brilliant. That's awesome. Yeah, nice. Oh, and a little like sort of handmade letter type thing, sort of, printed out but made to like weathered to look old and stuff, like, when you burn the edges of the paper and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So that was the other bit he gave me, which is really cool.
Nice, man. Well, sounds like a good project to be part of. A good exchange of items. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I think overall a good year for doing odd projects, good, like long-term projects like my Minotaurs as well. Still doing a little bit of Krieg. So overall a successful year of hobbying. That's really great, mate. That's really, really great. No, I'm happy for you in that regard. So I think, for me this year, my main hobby output has been this, to be honest. And I know that's obviously equally true for you as well, because obviously, you contribute as much in that regard. But obviously, because I get to do a lot of the editing and, well, because I do a lot of the editing and stuff, it's quite a demand on my time. So I do find that the podcast has really become, my main outlet for the hobby. I've embraced commissions this year. So I commissioned Phil from Rapid Fire Wargaming to paint me up a Dark Angel army, which I'm really happy with. I myself have been working on painting a Grey Shields Unnumbered Sons army that has essentially kind of not really come to completion just yet because the deadline that I was working towards wasn't met. And then subsequently, I kind of lost, not interest as such, but just lost momentum on that particular project. So that's, waiting to happen at some other point in the future. And then beyond that, yeah, it's just been a lot of gaming events, a lot of time spent getting under the skin of the 9th edition rule set and understanding the mechanics of the whole system and what it offers. And that's been, it's been an all right year from that perspective. I've definitely been doing a lot of 40k this year.
In terms of like games and events, have you got a favorite?
Well, I think the one that I had the most fun at was the Rapid Fire Wargaming event. And again, obviously, I understand that we talk about those guys and their event a lot here, and it might seem a bit biased, but it just was a fun event. It just ticked all of the boxes for me. I really enjoyed it. But beyond that, yeah, I mean, I did a bunch of 40k Brawl events that I was either TOing or playing in, and they were all of a good, consistent standard. They've got a good crew of people who go down to Entoyment for 40k Brawl, and those guys are all really great, and it's a fun community to be part of. So I do always enjoy playing at Entoyment, even if the style of gaming is very bog standard, GT mission pack 40k, which is fine. I think Entoyment is a really great facility, and there's a good community down there for sure. So that's good. Obviously, I did the LGT as well, which was fine. I think my experience of the LGT was very much that I really should have gone there or tried to convince yourself and others to join me for the weekend there, because it's quite, disenfranchising when you're doing something broadly by yourself. Not that I didn't know other people there, but, obviously the people I know versus people who are legitimately my friends is a very different conundrum. So
Yeah,
it would have been nice had you guys been able to come along to that for the weekend. I know you did the
doubles on the
doubles.
Friday. Yeah, because it was nice to play games with Richie there, but it was also nice just afterwards to catch up with like you and a bunch of other people that we knew that were like coming down ahead of the weekend events. So yeah, I know what you mean.
Wasn't overly nice catching up with Adam that evening. He was he was quite yes.
But he created the so lean catchphrase.
He did the crazy boy. But yeah, so interesting for sure. But no, look, I did a lot of gaming. I got some hobby stuff done, which I'm, happy with. I have painted some nice looking minis this year, but definitely not as many as I'd like to have gotten done. But you can't win them all, can you? You gotta deal with all the other things.
Yeah, this is the problem. It's like I'm constantly going, what do I want to work on next? Because it is easy to be a bit of a magpie and see the shiny thing in front of you and just go for that. But then you've got other stuff to work on. So it's like, realistically, I should just go, I'm going to try and get to 2,000 points for my Minotaurs army. And that could easily take me the whole year of next year to work on. But at the same time, I'm also like, I really want to do some of my Thunder Warriors. I've also been looking back at some of my Tyrannid models. So over Christmas, I've been doing a hobby advent calendar on my Instagram account, every day posting a different project that I've worked on, either this year or in the past. And the Tyrannid one is the one that probably went back the furthest, back to, I believe it was 7th edition when I first started my infamous, should we say, Tyrannid army, because I did one unit that I painted up of Tyrant Guard. So I posted up that as a photo one day, and then I dug out my Swarm Lord and Dimakaron base that I had done, and I photographed that and put it up as a project for another day. And it did actually make me go, I should really, they're really well painted. I should really do more of these. And so many people actually commented and were like, these are cool. And I was like, oh my God, they are cool, aren't they? And I was suddenly getting the groove back, and I was looking on the Warhammer app as like the stats of the Tyrannids and going, maybe I should, especially since the new White Dwarf's got that basically bug giant monster mash list. I was like, maybe I should do this, but I sort of know I need to have some restraints basically, and not be distracted by them, and try and actually finish off stuff that's actually literally physically on my desk at the moment that I need to get done, like my Contemptors I need to do next. Then maybe a bit more of my Thunder Warriors as a treat, then go back to my Minotaurs and do, I think, Blade Guard next and Eradicators. That'll probably take me all year, to be fair.
Well, yeah, possibly, but I mean, it certainly sounds like a good aspiration, and they were cool looking Nids. To be fair, mate, you should try and jump in on that bandwagon, because inevitably Nids will come out at some point during the course of 2022. So
yeah, no, that's true. Well, hopefully, we talked about it a little bit. I might be going full time as a content creator potentially, so maybe I'll actually have more time to paint them up. That's
exciting, mate.
That's my hope. Whether that'll happen or not, I will. Budgetary dependent, I guess.
Well, I think you've got every opportunity to give it a good go over the next couple months and see what kind of opportunities or see what kind of output you're able to create, and if it is that you get into a good rhythm with it and that you're able to, start to see improvement in terms of your engagement and so on, then why not continue to push on that as an aspiration? And yeah, I mean, I definitely think for someone in your position, it seems like something worth trying, if nothing else. It's the Hellstorm Mikey conundrum, where I think Mikey became a full-time content creator because he'd essentially lost his job and was like, I'm gonna roll the dice on myself and see what happens. And seemingly it's worked out quite well for him, so no reason why you couldn't necessarily be the same. But yeah, no, that's pretty cool, man. Look, I think we're gonna call it there. I'm struggling to keep my eyes open. My brain's becoming all foggy. But I just want to say happy Christmas to all our listeners. We have worked so hard throughout the course of 2021 to bring you this podcast every week. And it's been something that I'm incredibly proud of, and I'd like to assume Phil's proud of it too. But
no, I am indeed.
Yeah,
I actually really enjoy it. Doing it weekly, as mad as that
Hey,
as
no,
mad
that's
as that
awesome.
sounds.
I think that's the thing. It's, again, part of me does and then part of me doesn't. I think it's more to do with balance, right? My struggle has always been that my work is very demanding, and that I'm, the aspiration around doing weekly content in the course of 2021 was heavily influenced by how the year began, which is that we obviously came into it during a lockdown, and that, massively colored the way that I looked at the whole situation, and certainly had an impact on time that I had available. But it's been an interesting year. I think, I'm proud of the fact that we did it. I'm consistently impressed with the fact that we continue to output content and that we've maintained a regular cadence of releases, but also been able to stay relatively upbeat throughout. Because I think that's the thing that's really interesting, is that, you imagine that the fatigue would settle in, or I suppose the quality would alter. But I think due to how we do it, I think it maintains a certain consistency in terms of what we put out there and how we put it out there. But yeah, no, I'm proud of what we've accomplished in 2021. I'm excited to unveil the 40k Quiz of the Year to everyone next week, noting that unfortunately we still have fallen short of a few of my own quality benchmarks. I think I have some very high expectations for that output, and I've not been able to meet them yet. So I'll be interested to hear what people think. I think it's better than what we did in 2019, but I think there were a lot of variables that I hadn't been able to appropriately account for, which resulted in the overall kind of quality of the content not quite achieving what it was that I wanted to achieve. But, I don't want to be glass half empty about it. I think there's still some really, really great content in that quiz. And I think it's still incredibly entertaining. And I'm really hopeful that when we release it on New Year's Day, people will really enjoy it. And I think that kind of sets the scene really nicely for what 2022 is going to have in store for us, and the sorts of things that we're going to try and do, and how we're going to continue to try and innovate and grow our output, I suppose. So, no, I'm grateful to you, Phil, for helping and contributing and co-hosting and maintaining the kind of same level of motivation and enthusiasm for this as I have as well. I think, I think we both pick each other up. I think neither of us kind of wants to let the other one down, and I think that comes across in the way that we approach this stuff, and I think that's really great. But I'm also really grateful to everyone else who contributes to the podcast. Tim, Joe, Richie, these guys are, fantastic human beings, and it's really awesome that they support us and support what we're doing. So, yeah, and obviously more than anything, I'm really grateful to our listeners who have seemingly enjoyed what we've done, because that's fantastic, and I'm utterly gobsmacked by how many people were listening to the podcast in 2021, how much it's grown, and how much it continues to grow. And that's something that, I'm just really, really happy about. So, despite being a little bit groggy and a little bit out of my tree right now, I just want to say thank you. So, thank you, everyone. Phil, do you want to have any final thoughts on anything, pal?
Well, I won't go into quite the epic monologue as you, but suffice to say, yes, thank you to Richie, especially because he puts all the effort in to do the quizzes, and Tim and Joe, more Tim than Joe, because Joe is a, he's like our, what did we call them? The booty listeners. He will drop in from time to time. But we do love Joe all the same, and he's doing really well in his job and his own sort of like 40k community pillar of or plonker, maybe, whichever one we want to call him, success of his own. So he's doing really well with all that stuff. Especially to our fans, it's really cool that everyone just listening to the show is enough. I do love it when people reach out to us on social media, and I've had plenty of friendships and chats with people. That's been really good this year, much more so this year than previous years. Like, that seems to have grown quite a bit. The Patreon supporters especially, that's also really appreciated. That's really cool that we've got as many as we do. That's been quite surprising. So that is also a great help, I think, to the general running of the show. So thanks for listening. Have a good Christmas, have a good New Year, and see you all in 2022.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.